Marcus publicly breaks his engagement with Cybele. Marcus accuses Cybele of bullying Annika the moment she was revealed as the true saint. In the kingdom of Grandio, a saint is born once every 100 years. 7 years ago, the royal prophet declared the next saint would be the daughter of the Vias Count family. Cybele's stepmother recently branded her a fraud, claiming Annika is the real saint. Marcus furiously states they cannot let someone dangerous like Cybele stay near the true saint. Stripped of her status, Cybele is officially exiled. She is banished to the faraway land of Tori. The crowd murmurs in disbelief at the harsh sentence. Cybele stares in sheer shock at being sent to Tori. Marcus coldly assigns her to menial labor in the Knight's dormitory, a place currently crawling with monsters. Suddenly, Cybele's expression transforms into a radiant, sparkling smile. She clasps her hands together and enthusiastically thanks Marcus. Marcus and Annika are utterly baffled by her joyful acceptance. Cybele gladly embraces the punishment of roughing it in the Knight's dormitory with absolute pleasure. Cybele closes her eyes in profound bliss, realizing God truly does exist. She admits she's held a secret desire for far too long. She absolutely loves knights. In reality, she harbors a massive obsession with muscles. She excitedly fantasizes about the First Knight Division, an elite unit chosen from the absolute best. She drools over the thought of their powerful physiques, sparkling sweat, and strong arms swinging blades. Cybele never truly cared for Marcus anyway because he was far too thin for her tastes. She cheerfully bids the couple farewell, thanking Marcus while Annika smugly gloats. The former noble beams with pure joy as she departs. And so, she is gloriously exiled as the fake saint. A few weeks later, a carriage arrives at a grand stone estate. Cybele finally reaches the faraway land of Tori. A stern woman named Elga welcomes Cybele into a surprisingly large room. Cybele politely introduces herself, noting this room is better than the one her stepmother relegated her to back home. Elga notes Cybele's surprising energy. Unaware of the girl's true motivations, Cybele enthusiastically agrees to follow Elga once her bags are unpacked. Elga warns her that the work won't be easy for a former noble. Cybele nervously keeps her true obsession with knights a secret, fearing they will think she is entirely weird. Bursting with determination, Cybele lists chores like cleaning and laundry. She demands Elga give her any task, eager to prove her capabilities. Inwardly, she thanks her stepmother for freeing her from the helpless noble life. Ever since her father passed away, she handled all household chores herself anyway. Cybele passionately vows to learn and master everything from now on. Elga observes her resolve, noting that life clearly hasn't been easy for the young girl. Elga points out that Cybele is traveling incredibly light for a noble. Cybele cheerfully sets down her single, modest suitcase. Sadly, everything her father ever gave her was stolen by her stepmother and Annika. Despite her tragic past, Cybele looks up at the towering knight's dormitory with hope. Suddenly, a deep and gentle voice calls out from within a room. A striking man with dark hair looks down at her. Cybele immediately zeroes in on his chiseled muscles bulging beneath his crisp uniform. She is entirely overwhelmed by his towering height, long legs, and sturdy frame. Initially hyping herself up that the real fun is just beginning, Cybele suddenly blanks out and thinks she wouldn't mind dying right now. She quickly composes herself, bowing respectfully as she formally introduces herself to the commander and places herself under his guidance. Gripping her skirt tightly, she practically begs him to take care of her despite admitting she may not be much. The commander chuckles at her stiff formalities, telling the flustered girl to simply call him Leo. Leo warmly explains that he considers everyone taking care of the dormitory to be part of one big team and practically family. Captivated by his gentle smile, Cybele softly agrees to call him Leo, realizing it has been a long time since anyone smiled at her like that. Leo promises to introduce her to everyone at dinner, leaving Cybele deeply impressed by how much better he treats his staff compared to Lord Marcus. Another knight notes that dinner is being prepared, while Cybele insists that seeing where the knights live only fuels her intense motivation. Bursting with energy, she happily volunteers to help make dinner, brushing off concerns about exhaustion since she simply sat in a carriage all day. As Cybele steps away, Leo's subordinate remarks that she is quite an unusual young lady, and Leo thoughtfully agrees. Another knight approaches to ask about the new recruit, but Leo dismissively tells him to save it for dinner, prompting his subordinate to ask what is wrong. Leo covers his mouth with his hand, muttering a troubled refusal. And so, Cybele Vias begins her new life under Leo's watchful gaze. Walking away confidently, she resolves to embrace this chance to work at the knight's dormitory and see how things go. Night falls silently over the grand, moonlit estate of the dormitory. A hand firmly grips a quill, preparing to write in the quiet darkness. At dinner, Cybele marvels at the luxurious meal while insisting she is completely fine, leaving Leo to note how drastically different she is from the official reports. Sitting at his desk, Leo reviews the files claiming she is a false saint who was once engaged to Prince Marcus. The report alleges she was a wicked woman who tormented her stepsister, leading the prince to exile her to this dangerous, monster-threatened land. As a leader who just wants his people to live safely, Leo acknowledges that everyone working there has some difficult circumstances to deal with. He was fully prepared to accept a wicked woman, yet he couldn't help but laugh when she cheerfully asked for his guidance. Holding his quill, he questions if she intends to be his wife and if she is truly prepared to stay there for life. Despite wearing plain clothes after having her expensive belongings confiscated, her emerald green eyes sparkled with lively anticipation, unlike most terrified or exhausted newcomers. Mirko walks in and notices Leo's scary face, but Leo brushes it off to ask if Mirko thinks Lady Cybele is different from what they heard. Mirko agrees she didn't seem like a scheming, high-ranking noble at all, finding her pleasantly ordinary rather than careless or crude. Leo questions why a count's daughter would suddenly know how to cook, while Mirko points out that her help made tonight's dinner taste better than usual. Smiling, Mirko suggests that her cheerful personality and cooking skills are perfectly fine, reminding Leo that she officially starts working tomorrow. Leo clarifies he isn't worried about her being a malicious woman, knowing a person's true nature reveals itself quickly. Instead, his eyes narrow as he wonders just how much of the information he received about her was entirely false. The next morning before sunrise, an energetic Cybele eagerly asks Elga for tasks in the kitchen, making the older woman wonder what having a sister would be like. Despite the remote location, the elite knights of the Second Order are provided with an abundance of the finest food supplies. Cybele enjoys a luxurious meal of hearty meat soup, soft bread and fresh vegetables, completely overwhelmed by the delicious food and kind seniors. Surrounded by real, towering knights welcoming her warmly, a deeply flustered Cybele blushes as they accidentally step far too close. When asked to cook omelets, she accepts with explosive enthusiasm, privately praising God for this unbelievable divine reward and vowing to be a perfect girl. The dining hall erupts with joyous praise as the knights marvel over Cybele's incredibly fluffy omelets and perfectly seasoned soup. While the amazed knights ask what secret ingredient makes the soup so completely different, Cybele politely smiles while desperately holding back the urge to scream that her secret ingredient is love. Commander Leo officially places her in charge of all meal preparations, sparking a roaring cheer from the newly energized knights who feel their strength fully returning. Out in the courtyard, Elga watches in surprise as Cybele blazes through the massive piles of laundry with the practiced speed of a seasoned worker. Stretching her petite frame to reach the clothesline, Cybele wishes she were just a little taller but fiercely promises to exceed all expectations. She reflects on the harsh slave-like education of her past, which forced her to master cooking, cleaning, and laundry with absolute, relentless efficiency. Thanks to those grueling days, she had learned to finish her chores at lightning speed just so she could secretly watch night training and obsess over romance novels. While rapidly hanging up the massive shirts, Cybele suddenly freezes as she recognizes a distinct and thrilling uniform design. Her face erupts in a massive blush as she realizes she is holding the very uniforms the legendary knights sweat in beneath their heavy armor. Overwhelmed by the sheer size of the knights' muscular bodies, she stumbles dizzily, prompting a concerned Elga to urge her to rest for the day. Desperate to protect her newfound paradise, she frantically insists she is perfectly fine, terrified that revealing her knight-obsessed excitement will get her kicked out instantly. Channeling her past pride as a saint in training and a prince's former fiancé, Cybele fiercely clenches her fists and vows never to surrender to her intense worldly desires. Right as she rededicates herself to her chores, a deep, familiar voice gently calls her name from across the sunny courtyard. Turning around, she gasps to see Commander Leo, who had specifically sought her out after returning from his official duties just to check on her hard work. To her absolute shock, the commanding knights insist she rests inside while they eagerly take over their own chores to help the short-staffed dormitory. Watching the battle-hardened knights cheerfully hang laundry together, Cybele's heart swells with warmth as she finally understands what Leo meant about this place being a true family. Later, while enjoying delicious thick sandwiches on a quiet break, Cybele happily tells Elga how incredibly kind Leo, the knights, and the entire dormitory staff have been. Elga softly smiles, explaining that everyone in this remote outpost harbors their own special circumstances, which is exactly why they so warmly welcomed Cybele and her wonderful cooking. Opening up, Elga reveals she was practically sold here to pay off her parents' massive debts, prompting Cybele to gently admit that her own tragic situation is largely the same. Elga credits Commander Leo's profound kindness for making life bearable, leading Cybele to quietly realize that her brutal exile actually guided her straight toward genuine happiness. Cybele enthusiastically praises Leo's refined and approachable leadership, before turning to compliment Elga on her own striking beauty and wonderful kindness. Elga notes that the entire outpost has been visibly more energized since Cybele's arrival, leaving the young exile to gaze at Leo and wonder what secret past he might be hiding. Wiping her brow after another hard shift, Cybele reflects on her daily responsibilities, which strictly revolve around preparing hearty meals and managing the endless piles of laundry. Just as she approaches the courtyard again, Commander Leo warmly greets her for her hard work, noting the massive mountain of laundry still waiting to be tackled. Cybele loses her mind internally as she spots Leo standing beside Vice Captain Mirko, utterly dazzled by their perfectly proportioned, strong muscles bulging straight through their uniforms. She stands frozen in absolute shock as the elite captain and vice captain casually roll up their sleeves to help wash the laundry, gently warning each other not to rip the fabric. Blushing at the sight of his large hands holding the laundry, Cybele shyly protests his help. However, the man insists it will be much faster if they do it together. Overwhelmed by their kindness, she stands silently in awe. The blonde man reassures her not to worry, looking to Mirko for agreement. Mirko admits feeling guilty watching her handle everything alone, but Cybele joyfully declares that serving the knights is her happiness. They exchange warm words of mutual gratitude. Offering a supportive smile, Mirko urges her to just ask if she ever needs any help. She beams brightly and enthusiastically accepts his offer. Bidding Lady Cybele farewell, the two knights turn to leave the courtyard. As Leo and Mirko walk away, Cybele blankly wonders if they actually needed something from her. The knights marvel at a massive, mouth-watering platter of sandwiches served for today's lunch. One knight eagerly declares he has never tasted anything so completely delicious. A delighted knight praises Lady Cybele as an incredible cook, marveling at the incredibly crispy lettuce. While Mirko assumes she uses a special technique, she humbly reveals she simply washed and tore it by hand. The men express deep gratitude for her delicious food that always fills them with energy. Flustered but happy, Cybele giggles and tells the men they exaggerate way too much. Smiling warmly as the knights devour her meals, Cybele feels profound joy that she came here. She internally notes the strange absence of monster attacks in the dangerous area ever since she arrived. When a knight volunteers to handle the dishes, Cybele openly admires his impressive arm muscles and thanks him. She innocently attributes the absolute peace of the territory to the hard work of the knights protecting them. Later, in a quiet study, Leo confronts Mirko about his thoughts on the situation. Mirko rests his chin on his hand, deep in serious contemplation. Mirko concludes that while slightly odd at times, Cybele's completely natural reactions hold absolutely nothing suspicious. Pacing the room, Leo firmly agrees that the young woman doesn't appear to be acting at all. They reflect on her incredibly diligent and humble nature, noting her clear lack of any ill intent. Leo adds that Elga confirms Cybele does a fantastic job and absolutely never slacks off. Mirko solemnizes that Cybele's father, Count Vyas, tragically passed away 5 years ago. They piece together that her stepmother likely harbored a terrible relationship with Cybele. This drove the stepmother to adopt a relative solely to steal the family title. The knights theorize the wicked stepmother framed Cybele with completely false claims. She likely did this so her own real daughter could marry the prince, who blindly believed the lies without any proper investigation. Staring blankly ahead with furrowed brows, Mirko realizes the grim severity of the situation. He mutters quietly that the entire ordeal is incredibly bad. Leo severely warns Mirko that if this theory holds true, he won't be able to remain uninvolved in the fallout. Sweating slightly, Mirko agrees they must secretly investigate to protect Prince Marcus's future. A heavy silence falls over the room as Mirko stares downward in deep contemplation. Looking at the back of Cybele's braided hair in his mind, Mirko grimly imagines the horrible treatment she suffered under her stepmother. He softly confesses that he kind of understands exactly how that terrible isolation feels. He marvels at how her small body must have endured an unimaginable amount of hardship until now. Despite all her intense struggles and hard work, she miraculously remains endlessly cheerful. Clenching his hand over his face, Mirko fiercely resolves to help her if she ever struggles again. He firmly believes she has been through enough and truly deserves to just be happy now. Leo chuckles, suggesting that Cybele might actually be enjoying herself far more than they ever expected. Announcing a short break, Leo teasingly asks a flustered Mirko if he is currently thinking about her. Feeling thirsty in the middle of the night, Cybele happily decides to head down to the dining hall for some water. She gleefully reflects that every single day has been filled with pure happiness since she started working at the dormitory. Smelling the distinct aroma of herbal tea, Cybele cautiously peeks through the dining hall door. She is immediately spotted by the dark-haired knight, who calls out her name in surprise. The knight gently questions what she is doing awake and wandering the halls at this late hour. When she explains she just came for water, he notes that her timing is absolutely perfect. Reaching across the table, he gently offers her a warm cup of the brewed beverage. Blushing with wide eyes, Cybele accepts the drink and enthusiastically thanks him. The dark-haired knight sits quietly in the dim light, gazing at her with a remarkably soft and tender expression. The peaceful atmosphere thickens between them as she enjoys the warm drink. Brimming with energy, Cybele declares that everyone is so kind and she thoroughly enjoys her daily work. After confirming she has grown used to life there, she happily compliments the refreshing aroma of the tea. Cybele stares at him in mild confusion as a gentle, knowing smile spreads across his handsome face. Uttering a thoughtful hum, he continues to watch her with deep affection. Struggling to open a stubborn honey jar to sweeten her tea, Cybele gladly steps aside as Leo gently offers to help her. She silently swoons over Leo's long, bony fingers and prominent veins as he effortlessly pops the lid, mentally scolding herself for comparing his kindness to Prince Marcus's arrogance. Their hands unexpectedly brush together with a soft, startling tap. Flustered, Cybele frantically apologizes for accidentally touching the hands of a national treasure, while Leo calmly tries to reassure her. With a faint blush coloring his cheeks, Leo softly insists that he should be the one apologizing instead. Startled by his proximity, Cybele quickly excuses herself to fetch the honey, leaving a confused Leo wondering if he has something on his face. Despite her initial panic, she finds comfortable solace in that quiet moment as the sweet honey slowly dissolves into her tea. She wonders why Leo's beautiful black hair and deep eyes feel so incredibly familiar, as if she had already seen them in a dream. Later that evening, Cybele excitedly sits down at the dining table and happily declares it is time to eat. She practically drools over the wonderful aroma of the rabbit stew, slowly simmered in red wine and served with perfectly fluffy round bread. Overjoyed by the delicious food and kind knights, she realizes how much better this life is compared to the 5 years she spent trapped doing chores and receiving strict princess education. Startled from her euphoric daze, Leo suddenly appears behind her and asks what is making her so incredibly happy. Mortified that she accidentally spoke her thoughts out loud, Cybele frantically apologizes for raising her voice as Leo casually mentions he was just looking for a drink. Leo insists she keep eating and asks to join her, pouring himself a warm drink while she eagerly welcomes him to the table. As Leo takes a slow sip, Cybele blushes wildly, utterly captivated by the sight of his strong and manly Adam's apple. Snapping back to reality, she mentally slaps herself and vows to act like a proper lady instead of staring. Leo notes how much she seems to enjoy her meals, and Cybele happily compliments the deliciously cooked food. Savoring the meal, she softly expresses how incredibly lucky she feels to eat such soft, fluffy bread every day. Leo finds her humility highly unusual, pointing out that as a former noble lady and prince's fiancée, she must have eaten luxurious meals before. Cybele humbly admits she still has a long way to go compared to senior chefs, but Leo suddenly chokes on his drink when she panics over them sharing the same cup. Smiling warmly, Cybele expresses deep respect for the knight's kind and calm nature, noting how they completely lack the ungrateful arrogance of capital nobles. Leaning in close, she fiercely defends their honor, assuring a surprised Leo that her praise isn't an exaggeration at all. Leo gasps softly, momentarily caught completely off guard by the raw, unwavering sincerity sparkling in her wide eyes. Breaking the tension with a light-hearted laugh, Leo admits that talking with her gives him energy and genuinely helps him too. Blushing deeply at the unexpected compliment, Cybele realizes she never once shared such a genuinely enjoyable, laughing moment with Prince Marcus. She marvels at how freely the knights laugh here, a stark contrast to the strict, emotionally repressed nobles and royals she grew up around. Smiling gently, Leo agrees that talking with her is always fun, leaving Cybele deeply grateful for the annulment of her terrible engagement. Cybele suddenly feels dizzy, her mind spinning as she gazes at Leo, realizing he is the absolute ideal of a considerate, attentive knight captain. Staring at his striking features, She wonders if he seems extra charming because he flawlessly resembles the black-haired knight from her favorite romance novel. Her heart races as she desperately tries to remember the name of that book, completely captivated by the living embodiment of her fictional first love. Under the quiet glow of the night sky, the remote fortress stands tall and peaceful. A perceptive knight points out Cybele's incredible devotion, concluding that the bullying allegations were a complete lie and she was actually the victim. Snapping out of a daze, Leo is startled when a blonde comrade teases him for making the obvious face of a man in love. The teasing knight correctly guesses the object of Leo's affection is the adorable and highly energetic Lady Cybele. The vice captain bluntly interjects that he also likes Cybele for her amazing cooking and caring nature, utterly shocking a jealous Leo. Leo internally panics after realizing he was foolish to think he was the only one who cared for her, while his men note that nobody dislikes her. Catching the commander's glaring jealousy, the blonde knight smirks and points out that Leo clearly likes her in a completely romantic way. Leo denies falling for her yet, but his men remain highly suspicious since it is incredibly rare for him to show any interest in a woman. The knights press him further, highly skeptical of his weak denial. Leo reflects on his past, noting his father frequently urged him to marry while he solely focused on his knightly duties. Born from an affair with a mistress, Leo never felt comfortable in his own home and joined the knights at a very young age to escape. Having never experienced a deep relationship or any interest in love, Leo suddenly finds himself genuinely questioning his growing feelings for Cybele. His thoughts abruptly shift to a more serious matter as he questions if Cybele is truly just a normal girl or if she is actually the saint. Realizing the monsters have been unusually quiet and their fatigue instantly vanishes after eating her food, Leo deduces that Cybele's presence alone brings peace like a true saint. The vice-captain warns Leo to act fast if he wants to claim her, reminding him that saints are traditionally meant to marry the prince. The knights jokingly threaten to make a move themselves since Cybele is so popular, causing a flustered Leo to jump out of his seat. Despite the chaotic teasing, Leo silently vows to be far more cautious when dealing with her potential true identity. Meanwhile, the Grand Royal Palace stands bathed in sunlight, hiding the brewing political turmoil inside. Inside the estate, Annika screams in total frustration over her overwhelming studies while her strict tutor demands she lower her voice. The tutor complains to Prince Marcus that Annika keeps making the exact same mistakes, driving the exhausted girl to beg him for help. Marcus rubs his head in severe annoyance as Annika childishly whines about the tutor being far too strict. The strict tutor warns Annika she will fail as the crown princess, but the bratty girl arrogantly insists her title as Saintess guarantees her unconditional marriage to Marcus. The disgusted tutor officially quits her princess training after just 1 month, leaving Marcus stressed while Annika shamelessly clings to him. Marcus internally fumes, realizing he desperately needs this marriage for the survival and standing of both himself and his mother. Dark rumors begin to circulate through the palace regarding a shocking new development surrounding His Majesty. The king completely ignores the queen's son, opting instead to build a separate residence for his concubine and their illegitimate child who strongly resembles the noble great-grandfather. A terrified Marcus realizes the king might actually bypass him and make his older illegitimate brother the next ruler. Realizing his extremely precarious position, Marcus curses Annika's lack of proper powers and begins to deeply question if she is truly the real Saintess. Annika manipulates him by producing a fake report, claiming Cybele was just violently jealous and aggressively declaring herself the true Saintess. Hearing her superficial confession of love, Marcus feels a twisted sense of relief, eagerly convincing himself that Cybele was indeed the fake all along. Leo lamented that their brother would inherit the throne instead of them, realizing the claims of jealousy made complete sense. Annika loudly complained she was too tired to use her abilities today, despite intense demands to show the power of the Saintess. Growing up alongside Cybele, the noble daughter was assumed to be the real Saintess to prevent an absolute disaster. Lady Cybele gladly presented sweet, honey-soaked lemons to the exhausted knights, praising their relentless hard work. Captain Leo jokingly teased Cybele for watching sweaty men train, though she nervously insisted it was just fun to observe. Noting the visitors, the men challenged Leo to spar for a bit before enjoying the refreshments. Accepting the challenge, Leo boldly asked a flustered Cybele to hold his jacket. Grabbing their weapons, the knights confidently agreed to clash with real swords and hold nothing back. Panic briefly erupted over the danger of a real duel, while Cybele quietly marveled at the wonderful scent of the jacket in her arms. Blades violently clashed as the intense sparring match officially began without a hint of restraint. Assessing his opponent, Leo coldly praised the stance but swiftly declared it too weak. Onlookers praised the junior knight's skill, even as they noted he was merely being toyed with. Exploiting a sluggish move, the superior swordsman spotted a wide opening and pressed the attack. Dust kicked up from the dirt as a swift boot firmly planted itself during the tense footwork. Surrendering the match, the junior knight thanked his opponent, while Leo was praised as being far stronger. A sudden wave of nervousness washed over Cybele as she realized Captain Leo's true, overwhelming strength. Later that night, Cybele nervously visited Leo's quarters to offer him a special delivery. She handed him the fatigue-relieving honey lemons he missed earlier, turning to leave before he stopped her. Gazing warmly at her, Leo gently asked if she wouldn't mind joining him for a cup of tea. Honored to drink tea brewed by the captain himself, Cybele sat as he inquired about her childhood home. Expressing deep concern, Leo gently asked if she was overdoing it by always working so tirelessly for them. Cybele immediately brightened, insisting she was currently happier than she had ever been in her life. Sensing lingering hesitation, Cybele wondered if Leo had more to say as he casually eyed her remaining parcel. Explaining the second gift was for Mirko, Cybele agreed to let Leo deliver it to avoid interrupting the vice-captain's training. Looking her in the eyes, Leo smoothly asked if she would like to go out with him on their next day off. He quickly added a gentle caveat, assuring her it was entirely up to her. Complete shock seized Cybele at the sudden, unbelievable prospect of going out with Sir Leo. Time passed, and a grand carriage arrived to formally take Cybele and Leo into town. Taking her hand like a true escort, Leo thanked her for stepping away from her busy schedule to enjoy a much-needed break. Deeply moved that Leo treated her so kindly despite knowing her fake saint circumstances, Cybele happily expressed her gratitude for the invitation. Walking beside Leo, Cybele desperately restrains her urge to snuggle up and touch his strong arms and broad shoulders. Staring in awe at his amazing casual outfit, she loudly blurts out her thanks for today as Leo turns in confusion. As they enter the bustling city of Tori, townspeople eagerly greet the captain and ask if he is out shopping. A vendor happily offers Leo some fresh apples, curiously asking about the young lady accompanying him. Cybele blushes furiously as the townspeople whisper and excitedly wonder if the captain is on a date. Her heart pounds wildly as she internally screams, questioning if going on an actual date with him is truly okay. Leo gently helps her down from the carriage and warns her to be careful in the crowd, while Cybele vows to never wash her hand again. Overwhelmed by her infatuation, she dramatically resolves to follow him anywhere, even into the depths of hell. They enter a chic boutique displaying trendy date dresses, where the shopkeeper warmly welcomes them. Leo offers to buy her a dress as a thank you gift, but a thoroughly confused Cybele wonders if he has a hobby of cross-dressing. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, Cybele is amazed at how well the dress suits her while Leo assures her he doesn't give empty compliments. Leo asks if they can go out together again while she wears the dress, leaving Cybele's heart racing as she questions if he is truly okay with this. Realizing he might have gotten carried away, Leo casually suggests they eat some skewers outside while Cybele happily accepts. Cybele eagerly bites into the food, marveling at how incredibly tender and perfectly salted the venison is. A group of aggressive delinquents suddenly causes a scene, refusing to pay for their meal and falsely accusing the shopkeeper of serving rotten meat. One of the thugs violently challenges the shopkeeper, prompting Leo to firmly instruct Cybele to stay put. In a lightning-fast motion, Leo grabs the aggressive punk and swiftly flips him into the air. Leo effortlessly slams the delinquent onto the ground, pinning him down with undeniable strength and authority. The stunned crowd recognizes the first night captain in action and immediately calls for the local guards, while a clerk regrets not asking for a handshake. Cybele reflects on Leo's incredible combat skills and kindness, amazed at how he easily handled the trouble while letting his subordinates rest. Continuing their stroll, Cybele stops in her tracks and eagerly asks Leo if they can visit a specific shop that caught her eye. Entering the mysterious store, they admire a beautiful magic stone while the shopkeeper warmly greets them. The shopkeeper explains that while most accessories lack real power, high-quality magic stones are imbued with magical energy to serve as useful tools. Cybele's eyes light up as she notices a specific stone, realizing its deep color perfectly matches Leo's eyes. After the shopkeeper reveals it functions as a powerful protective charm when preyed upon, Cybele immediately decides to buy it for Leo. Watching her excitedly make the purchase, Leo silently notes the faint magical power radiating from the stone, knowing Cybele likely cannot sense it. Leaving the empty, mysterious shop, Cybele doubts the prayers of a fake Saintess will work but still rejoices over her great purchase. As Leo suggests grabbing some tea while they wait for their carriage, Cybele tightly clutches the stone and reflects on this being her first time praying. Closing her eyes, she earnestly prays for the stone to protect Leo from monsters and all forms of danger. Snapping back to reality, she points out a lively area nearby, eager to continue exploring the town with him. The sense opens with a vibrant illustration, perfectly setting the stage for the romantic and magical moments to come. Holding the small magic stone, a surprised Leo notes its unnatural warmth as Cybele's sweet voice echoes in his mind. Remembering their exchange, Cybele playfully gives him the stone, revealing she infused it with prayers for his absolute safety on dangerous missions. Though she calls it a small token, the faint magical power radiating from the stone has grown far beyond what the crystal can contain. Recognizing the overwhelming power of her prayer, Leo realizes with a stunning jolt that this is the undeniable power of the true saint. Meanwhile, Cybele realizes she finally has a rare and precious day off from her endless dormitory chores. Desperate to distract herself from the lingering thoughts of her unexpected date with Leo, she frantically decides to clean the training room. While vigorously scrubbing, she playfully admits she would actually welcome the interruption of a handsome knight dropping by. Enjoying the rare tranquility of her day off, Cybele fully immerses herself in the peaceful atmosphere of the stone fortress. Shaking off her distracting thoughts about Leo, she fiercely commits to cleaning the training room to keep her busy mind completely occupied. With a bright smile, she prepares the cleaning supplies, secretly wishing for some unexpected company to liven up the quiet halls. A sudden rustle of movement catches her sharp attention, prompting her to peek cautiously into the grand training room. To her absolute shock and intense delight, she spots a shirtless Leo, internally screaming over the glorious reward of his magnificent muscles. Flustered by her sudden intrusion, she frantically apologizes for interrupting the busy captain's intense private training session. Utterly dazzled by his overwhelming presence, Cybele realizes her wildly racing heart is driven by something far deeper than just muscle appreciation. Noticing her flushed face, Leo gently apologizes for his unsightly, sweaty appearance, completely unaware of her internal, swooning panic. Cybele cheerfully reassures him that she genuinely enjoys helping out, keeping her true, muscle-loving reward a fiercely guarded secret. Touched by her constant dedication, Leo earnestly steps forward and encourages her to rely on him whenever something troubles her. Opening up about his past, Leo confesses he ran away from an uncomfortable home to join the Knights, gently offering her a deeply sympathetic ear. Despite his difficult past, Leo smiles warmly and declares he has absolutely no regrets, feeling truly happy and fulfilled as a knight. Leaning in with profound sincerity, he begs to share her burdens, desperate to help her carry any hidden pain she might harbor. Deeply moved by his profound kindness, Cybele listens intently as Leo promises to always be on her side, only if she wants him to be. Cybele warmly thanks him, happily confessing that every single day since she arrived at the remote fortress has been immensely fun and fulfilling. Relieved by her genuine happiness, Leo flashes his usual gentle smile and heads off to wash up, while Cybele hilariously vows not to drool. Watching him leave, Cybele realizes she will absolutely never forget the serious, caring expression Leo wore during their heartfelt conversation. The quiet atmosphere beautifully lingers, softly highlighting the deep emotional bond steadily growing between the exiled noble and the stoic commander. Later that evening, the peaceful silence of the dormitory is suddenly broken by the sound of quiet, approaching footsteps. Vice Captain Mirko casually drops by late at night, happily praising the delicious late-night snack Cybele masterfully prepared. Staring intensely at Mirko, Leo bluntly analyzes his sharp eyes, high nose, and well-defined lips, thoroughly confusing the handsome vice captain. A bewildered Mirko completely rejects Leo's highly suspicious scrutiny, fiercely demanding to know why the captain is suddenly analyzing his undeniable popularity with women. Mirko teasingly noted that Cybele had been watching Leo completely mesmerized, prompting the flustered captain to challenge his subordinate to a sudden spar. Realizing Mirko was right about Cybele making him her priority by serving his food first, Leo faced blunt questions about his romantic feelings. Flashing back to the moment Cybele infused magic into a stone, Leo admitted he got caught up in the moment today and confessed his feelings. He deeply wondered if that dazzling, miraculous power he witnessed was actually the true manifestation of a saint's prayer. Leo revealed he told Cybele she could always rely on him, and she responded with a beautiful, grateful smile. Mirko confidently stated Leo's feelings definitely reached her, though Leo remained incredibly anxious about the entire situation. Staring ahead with absolute resolve, Leo declared his profound love for Cybele regardless of her true identity. Elsewhere in a serene courtyard, Annika was questioned if it was finally time to resume her royal bride training. Shoving cake into her mouth, Annika arrogantly insisted she would become the crown prince's wife simply because she possessed the title of saint. Lord Marcus gently criticized her excessive eating, causing Annika to angrily demand more cake and fiercely claim a saint must be happy for her powers to work. A panicked knight suddenly interrupted their courtyard conversation, loudly announcing that a terrifying monster had appeared within the royal capital. While Annika selfishly expressed relief about the castle's safety, Marcus deeply questioned why monsters were invading despite the Saintess's active presence. Marcus intensely realized that no monsters had appeared in the Tory danger zone for several months, confirming zero recent damage incidents. A chilling realization struck the prince as he deduced this unprecedented peace perfectly aligned with the exact time frame they exiled Cybele. Marcus reflected that only Annika's mother ever claimed to witness her saint-like powers, contrasting sharply with Cybele's lack of visible signs. Driven by mounting suspicion and the need for truth, Marcus decisively ordered his subordinate Rick to immediately infiltrate the Tory region. Back at the distant knight headquarters, Cybele pleasantly greeted a young man and curiously asked if he was a new recruit. Flashing a bright, friendly smile, the cheerful newcomer formally introduced himself to Cybele as Rick. Rick excitedly explained he had just returned from studying advanced magic technology in the highly regarded Barhand Kingdom. A familiar inquiry unexpectedly echoed in the corridor, questioning once again if the cheerful young man was indeed a new recruit. Radiating an easygoing and approachable charm, the friendly man happily repeated his introduction as Rick. After Leo awkwardly interrupted their chat, Rick enthusiastically promised to put his barhand magic knowledge to extremely good use. Cybele gently asked Leo when he would finish his work, suggesting they talk in the courtyard in about an hour. Noticing Leo's obvious anxiety, Cybele softly asked if he had something important to discuss with her. Startled, Leo quickly agreed to the upcoming meeting, promising to see her later before rushing off. Caught entirely off guard by a sudden collision, Cybele found herself securely trapped within Leo's strong and protective embrace. Blushing furiously from the intense proximity, Cybele completely panicked and frantically apologized to the captain. Pinning her against the wall to steady her balance, Leo breathed heavily as a stunned Cybele nervously whispered his name. Other knights rushed over to investigate the commotion, prompting an extremely flustered Leo to loudly ask if she was hurt. Thoroughly overwhelmed by the surprise encounter, Cybele desperately fled to finish cleaning while secretly admitting she didn't mind being crushed under him. Cybele sits quietly by herself on a peaceful stone bench outside the dormitory. A dark-haired knight approaches with a warm smile as Cybele happily recognizes him as Rick. Hoping to return the kindness she received, she warmly greets the newcomer and explains she is just waiting for someone. Leaning in close with a charming smirk, Rick boldly asks if her secret meeting is actually a date. He teasingly probes if she has a lover among the many men in the First Knights while she frantically denies the idea. Brushing off his teasing, Rick notices the captain arriving and quickly bids her farewell. Leo approaches with a serious expression and immediately asks if the knight was bothering her or trying to talk about romance. Leo explains that a sudden transfer from the capital is highly suspicious and firmly warns her to be careful around the newcomer. A subordinate suddenly yells for the captain about an urgent matter, prompting Leo to leave after making her promise not to be alone with Rick. Not entirely sure what is going on, Cybele resolves to heed the captain's warning and stay on her guard. Later that night, the dining hall comes alive with a bustling welcome party in honor of the new recruit. The rowdy knights cheerfully invite Cybele to sit and drink with them while playfully teasing a heavily intoxicated Yodi. Yodi drunkenly boasts about handling liquor while Leo steps in to scold him for bothering the young lady. Fearing her true nature might slip out if she drinks, Cybele offers to clean up empty bottles as Leo gently suggests she get some rest. A sudden arm wrestling contest breaks out, leaving Cybele blushing in absolute awe at the magnificent display of raw strength. Rick easily overpowers a frustrated Yodi in the match while Cybele quietly sneaks by to gather the empty bottles. Demanding a rematch, an incredibly pumped Yodi fiercely declares that he will go all out this time. To Cybele's absolute shock and horror, the drunk knight starts aggressively stripping off his shirt right in the middle of the dining hall. Elga furiously yells at the idiot to dress himself as a completely flustered Cybele flees the chaotic room in a total panic. Leo quickly follows her out into the quiet hallway where they share a silent and slightly awkward pause. Cybele frantically begs him not to change anything since she will be careful, leaving Leo to sigh deeply over his unruly men. Stepping safely into her room, she cheerfully assures him that she doesn't mind the chaos at all. Looking deeply conflicted and slightly nervous, Leo hesitantly asks if he can have a moment of her time. Her mind instantly races in sheer panic as she wonders if the captain somehow realized she was secretly admiring their muscles. Dropping to her knees in pure desperation, she profusely apologizes and dramatically begs him not to hold back her punishment. A completely baffled Leo asks what on earth she is talking about as she tearfully pleads with him not to kick her out. Staring down at her dramatic display of submission, Leo is left utterly speechless and confused. Gently urging her to stand, he softly explains that he had no particular reason and simply wanted to talk with her for a bit. Blushing deeply with a nervous expression, Leo shyly asks if he is bothering her while admitting her presence is a huge honor. Cybele fiercely denies being bothered, her heart melting completely as she gazes up at his warm and incredibly genuine smile. A strange, unfamiliar warmth unexpectedly blooms within Leo's chest as he reflects on Cybele's pure nature. Peering intensely through the narrow crack of the door, he silently watches the cheerful girl work. Gazing at her bright smile, he realizes Cybele possesses an untainted, kind heart that is truly pure and innocent. Remembering how she shyly lowered her gaze and deeply blushed, Leo furiously covers his own face while worrying that living in a male dorm must be tough for her. His comrades openly declare they should appreciate her far more, praising how the selfless girl always prioritizes them despite claiming she is fine. When the knights notice Cybele's rare absence from the dining hall, a blushing Leo desperately defends his detailed knowledge of her afternoon off as mere captain's duty. A dark-haired knight playfully wonders if he should ask Cybele out on a date, instantly sparking shock before casually taking a seat. Rick, a highly skilled new knight recently dispatched from the royal capital due to monster attacks, asks the table if Cybele is usually in charge of cooking. The knights quietly speculate if the capital's sudden monster attacks are directly tied to Cybele's exile, leaving Prince Marcus feeling highly uneasy. Hearing Rick note how loved Cybele is, Leo narrows his eyes in dark suspicion, silently wondering if this newcomer is actually a spy sent by Prince Marcus. The blonde knight aggressively warns Rick not to make a move on Cybele, happily teasing their slow-to-love captain's obvious special fondness for her. The dorm mother suddenly interrupts the banter, casually revealing that Cybele volunteered to clean the captain's room because the usual staff caught a cold. Panicking over the terrifying thought of his underwear lying around, Leo instantly abandons his meal and sprints off to check on her. Striding frantically down the grand hallway, he fiercely rationalizes that leaving unmentionables out is completely unacceptable regardless of who finds them. Bursting into his quarters, he finds Cybele happily scrubbing the floor and quickly apologizes for ruining her rare afternoon off. Pausing her diligent scrubbing, she looks up as the towering commander steps closely toward her across the polished wooden floor. Gazing down at her wet hands, Leo gently thanks her for her endless hard work while noting the water must be freezing cold. Flashing a brilliant smile, she earnestly insists that making the hard-working knights comfortable is what truly brings her absolute happiness. Touched by her profound selflessness, Leo steps closer and softly declares that he desperately wants her to relax and find joy too. Overwhelmed by her incredibly cute excitement over a popular new cake shop, a blushing Leo smoothly promises to buy her sweet treats next time. Determined to pull her away from her chores, he grabs the laundry basket and firmly insists they go enjoy a nice lunch together. As he snatches the laundry away, a pair of his dark trunks suddenly slips loose and lands flatly on the floor between them. Moving with lightning speed, Leo violently kicks his fallen underwear out of sight before she can notice, desperately dragging her out of the room. Later that day, a sudden sneeze escapes Cybele, prompting Elga to strictly order her to take the day off and recover. Firmly pushing the protesting girl toward her quarters, Elga mercilessly demands she finally rest her overworked body. Trudging weakly up the grand staircase, Cybele starts feeling the undeniable chills of a fever just as a loud voice suddenly calls her name. Rick quickly intercepts her, pleading for her to accompany him to the Lord's mansion to deliver an urgent forgotten item for the captain. Despite remembering Leo's strict warning never to be alone with this newcomer, she foolishly convinces herself that a simple delivery mission will be perfectly safe. Flashing a highly suspicious smile, Rick eagerly thanks her as she naively agrees to push through her rising fever to help him. Grabbing her hand forcefully, he pulls a stunned Cybele toward a waiting horse, insisting it is far faster as they ride off into dangerous unknown territory. Riding behind the newly recruited knight, Cybele anxiously wondered what was wrong with her as he instructed her to hold on tight. She silently scolded herself for rudely wishing she was riding with Leo instead, catching Rick's attention as he asked what was wrong. As the horse galloped forward, Cybele internally berated herself for being so picky about knights. The rhythmic galloping continued as the pair rode further away from the safety of the town. Rick claimed they were taking a shortcut, but a nervous Cybele pointed out that the path clearly led straight into the forest. Noting they were heading into the dense woods behind the knight's dormitory, she hesitantly asked if he was absolutely sure about the route. Growing increasingly anxious as the forest thickened, Cybele asked again if this was the right way, only for Rick to bluntly call her noisy. Dropping his friendly facade entirely, Rick coldly ordered his passenger to shut up for a second. Wide-eyed and trembling, Cybele stared in absolute shock at the sudden, terrifying shift in her escort's demeanor. Bringing the horse to a halt, Rick ominously announced that they had finally arrived at their destination. Staring at a jagged, dark cave, Cybele instantly realized that no matter how you looked at it, this was not the Lord's mansion. Cybele let out a terrified shriek as Rick aggressively grabbed her, asking if she still didn't understand the situation. Looming over the frightened girl with a dark glare, Rick demanded that she tell him the absolute truth. With piercing intensity, he directly asked her if she was actually the true saint. Thoroughly confused and intimidated, Cybele could only utter a breathless gasp as Rick repeated his heavy question. Denying the claim, Cybele explained her younger sister was the saint, but Rick countered that Lord Marcus was frustrated because Tori remained monster-free while the capital was attacked. Rick revealed Marcus sent him to observe her because he suspected she was the real saint, noting her cooking gave people energy even if she hadn't done anything overtly magical. Deciding he was tired of just watching and remaining unsure, Rick declared he would simply test her powers directly. Raising his arm with absolute confidence, the undercover knight aimed his hand toward the dense, shadowed trees. Violent crackles of dark energy erupted from his palm as he unleashed a sudden burst of intense magic. A massive, menacing monster wolf emerged from the dark mouth of the cave with a low, terrifying growl. Cybele frantically urged him to run, but Rick calmly told her to use her saint's power to handle the beast, ignoring her cries that such a demand was ridiculous. Stepping forward, Rick casually blasted the surrounding terrain with a devastating, explosive magical attack. Blushing with absolute awe, Cybele marveled at the display of real magic as a fiery blast forced the beast to growl in anger. The sheer force of the explosive spell ripped through the rocky landscape, scattering debris across the battlefield. Back at the headquarters, a horrified Leo learned that Rick had taken Cybele, instantly apologizing and blaming himself for not being more careful. Upon hearing that Rick used a fake delivery excuse to leave with Cybele, Leo and Mirko immediately spurred their horses into a frantic gallop to rescue her. Meanwhile, Rick fiercely clashed with the pack of wolves, while Cybele worriedly noted that there were far too many enemies despite his protection. Rick told her to stay back and rest, then mockingly questioned if her powers were weakened by her sudden sneeze, noting she was surprisingly calm for a fake saint. Completely unnoticed in the chaos, a giant, shadowy wolf silently crept up right behind the vulnerable Cybele with a sinister growl. Trapped in a dark cave with vicious monsters lurking outside, Cybele braces for the end and wonders if she is truly going to die. Accepting her fate, she peacefully reflects that her life was mostly wonderful thanks to the precious memories she made with the knights. In her final moments, she humorously admits her only dying regret is that she never got to bury her face into Leo's magnificent chest muscles. A terrifying wolf lunges fiercely at her with bared fangs, only to be abruptly slashed by an unseen blade. Blood splatters the air as Leo arrives like a striking hero on horseback, desperately calling out her name. Cybele stares in wide-eyed disbelief as a frantic Leo rushes toward her, deeply moved that he came to her rescue. Believing herself to be the luckiest person alive, Cybele loses all her remaining strength and gracefully collapses toward the ground. Suddenly, a blinding, magnificent aura erupts from her body, illuminating the entire area with divine energy. With her eyes closed and hands gently clasped, Cybele unconsciously channels an overwhelmingly pure light. The sheer intensity of the radiant magic sears the terrifying monsters, causing them to scream and retreat in agony. As the divine light slowly fades away, Cybele lies completely unconscious on the ground while Leo and Rick rush to her side. Scooping her up in his arms, Leo realizes in horror that her body is burning up as Rick urgently calls for a doctor. In that miraculous, life-saving moment, the undeniable power of the true saint was completely unleashed. Safely back at the dormitory some time later, a recovered Cybele warmly greets Leo as he asks if she is free. He gently opens a beautiful box to reveal a massive, decadent strawberry cake, asking if she would like to share some tea with him. Touched by the gesture, Cybele recognizes the incredibly popular cake and realizes Leo must have waited in a long line just to get it. Swooning over his incredible kindness, a beaming Cybele eagerly agrees and rushes off to prepare the tea. Elga and the other maids gasp in shock, explaining to Cybele that the captain must have woken up at dawn to secure the highly coveted dessert. Completely oblivious to Leo's romantic intentions, a delighted Cybele announces she will brew extra tea so the whole dormitory can enjoy the massive treat. The dining hall quickly fills with rowdy, excited knights who loudly cheer and thank their captain for the generous feast. The hungry men eagerly dive into the dessert, happily fighting over the largest strawberries and the thickest slices of cream. Seeing Leo's awkward smile, a guilty Cybele realizes she made a huge mistake by inviting the entire dorm to what was supposed to be a private moment. The knights suddenly freeze in horror as they realize Leo bought the cake exclusively for Cybele, while a flustered Leo desperately insists they keep eating. Claiming he is glad everyone is happy, Leo quietly excuses himself from the chaotic room as Cybele anxiously watches him leave. Offering her a gentle, reassuring smile, Leo smoothly lies that he has too much work to do and will pass on the cake entirely. Staring after him, Cybele feels a deep pang of regret, knowing full well that the incredibly kind captain actually wanted a slice. In reality, Leo's only motivation for going through so much trouble was a pure, simple desire to make Cybele happy. He had sneaked out of the dormitory at the crack of dawn, patiently waiting outside the popular bakery just to secure the perfect gift. Although the cake was certainly large enough to share with his beloved squad, his absolute priority was giving Cybele something special. Leo silently reflects that his true, unspoken wish was just to sit alone with her and watch her face light up with joy. Cybele warmly hands a small package to her senior co-workers, always eager to share her joy and help out. Sitting quietly in his office, a frustrated Leo reflects on how his selfish attempt to monopolize the sweet girl has totally backfired. A gentle knock breaks his thoughts as Cybele peeks through the doorway, politely apologizing for interrupting the busy commander's work. She reveals a beautifully decorated box of fresh cupcakes, leaving a stunned Leo staring at the unexpected gift in pure shock. Blushing softly, she shyly admits her homemade treats might not match a professional bakery, but she desperately wanted him to enjoy some cake too. Profoundly moved, Leo stares at her in sheer disbelief, utterly captivated that she carved out precious time from her busy schedule just for him. As she flashes a radiant smile, Leo's mind spirals into wild hope, wondering if the wonderful girl actually returns his deep romantic feelings. His romantic illusions instantly shatter when she cheerfully reveals she made enough cupcakes for Mirko and the entire night squad. Face-palming in brutal embarrassment, Leo mentally scolds himself for foolishly believing he was the sole recipient of her sweet affection. Unable to stand the thought of her wandering the halls late at night, a fiercely jealous Leo grabs his coat and insists on escorting her. Cybele tries to protest his sudden escort, but Leo firmly shuts it down by claiming he isn't busy, silently mocking his own childish jealousy. Completely unaware of his intense internal struggle, Cybele flashes an absolutely dazzling smile and happily accepts his protective offer. As they stroll together, a deeply embarrassed Leo mentally kicks himself, feeling pathetic for trying to use sweets to win her heart. The scene shifts to a sharp-eyed young man named Yodi, who confidently introduces himself as an elite member of the First Knight's Order. Sitting casually in his quarters, Yodi openly declares his deep, unwavering loyalty to his esteemed and legendary division. Reflecting on his prestigious background, he warmly praises Leo as a kind older brother figure who effortlessly commands the respect of his men. His thoughts happily shift to Cybele, the adorable new arrival who instantly brightened the grim outpost with her incredible cooking and constant smiles. A soft blush creeps across his face as he vividly imagines the delightful, impossible fantasy of making the sweet girl his girlfriend. However, Yodi's hopes take a hit when he notices the intensely rare, romantic attention their normally stoic captain directs solely at Cybele. Narrowing his eyes in sheer frustration, Yodi agonizes over his captain's absolute inability to confess due to his unbelievable shyness. Catching a cheerful Cybele in the hallway, Yodi mischievously points her straight toward the training room where the captain is working out. Sensing a golden opportunity, Yodi smoothly tasks the eager girl with delivering fresh water and a towel to the sweating commander. Yodi chuckles wickedly as his brilliant matchmaking plan falls perfectly into place, watching the unsuspecting girl approach the training room. Cybele frantically tries to flee upon seeing a half-naked Leo, but a panicking Leo begs her to wait while she wildly flails at the mysteriously jammed door. Closing the distance in a flash, the heavily muscled, shirtless Leo accidentally pins a deeply flustered Cybele against the stubborn wooden door. As Leo softly orders her to wait, a suspicious rustling noise from the other side of the door suddenly catches his sharp, battle-trained attention. With an explosive surge of raw power, Leo violently smashes his fist straight through the heavy wood, obliterating the door in a massive shockwave. The shattered door crashes to the floor, leaving an oblivious Cybele to loudly cheer for Leo's unbelievable display of brute strength. Leo glares absolute daggers at a cowering Yodi, while a panicked Cybele rushes off to find an ice pack for the groaning knight. Rubbing his bruised head, Yodi pathetically whines to a terrifyingly calm Leo that he was only trying to force a romantic moment between them. Yodi thinks about how close Leo is to making a move yet so far, noting he would be much more aggressive in that situation. A shirtless, sweaty Leo appreciates Yodi's thought but asks him to support them in a more normal way, though Yodi justifies his actions by saying he at least made Cybele's heart race a little. Looking at Leo with half-closed eyes, Yodi argues that if he leaves things normal, Leo will never make a move in his entire life. Leo insists rushing things won't help and questions if Yodi speaks from experience, but Yodi warns that Rick might like Cybele too and could take her away if Leo keeps hesitating. A flustered Cybele rushes in, apologizing for keeping Yodi waiting and offering him something to cool down, completely oblivious to the tension. Yodi nervously wonders why the captain is glaring at him so intensely, internally begging Leo to just confess his feelings already if he is going to be this jealous. Yodi mischievously tells a shocked Cybele that their usually perfect captain hurt his foot kicking a door, noting that Leo becomes completely useless whenever Cybele is involved. Yodi quickly tells a startled Leo to lean on Cybele's shoulder and go to the infirmary to get properly treated, abruptly leaving the two of them alone. A blushing, sweaty Leo stammers that he is fine and doesn't want to bother her, but a smiling Yodi simply waves them off and remarks that the First Knight's Order dorm is as lively as always. Fast forward to the forest, Leo fiercely tackles Cybele to the ground to protect her from danger, desperately calling out her name. Holding an unconscious Cybele closely, Leo breathes a sigh of relief as he realizes she is okay and merely seems to be asleep. Leo stands up while protectively cradling Cybele in his arms, turning his intense gaze toward Rick in the desolate forest clearing. Rick sits casually on the ground near the cave entrance, watching calmly as Leo tightly guards the sleeping Cybele. Looking slightly battered but observant, Rick openly confirms his suspicion that Cybele truly is the saint. Leo suddenly dashes forward with incredible speed, his heavy boots kicking up dirt as he aggressively closes the distance. Furious, Leo violently grabs Rick by the collar of his uniform, hauling him up and glaring fiercely into his eyes. Leo demands to know if Rick realizes the danger of his actions, prompting Rick to smoothly explain that he was following Prince Marcus's orders to confirm if she was the saint. When Leo angrily questions if Marcus authorized putting her in danger, Rick calmly dismisses the concern by stating that handling a few wolves was easy with him there. Leo sharply headbutts Rick with a violent impact, punishing him physically for recklessly endangering Cybele's life. Standing over a seated Rick, Leo scolds him for thinking it was easy when Cybele was nearly hurt, declaring that he would have protected her even at the cost of his own life. Rick casually argues he could have used fire magic to burn the wolves down, but an enraged Leo points out he might have burned the whole forest and questions what his plan is now. Rick firmly states that his mission is officially over now that he has successfully confirmed Cybele's true identity as the saint. Bowing his head slightly, Rick announces he will return to the capital to report his findings to Prince Marcus, addressing Leo respectfully as Your Highness. Leo stares back with an intense, piercing expression, silently absorbing the weight of Rick's formal acknowledgement of his royal status. Rick observes that there are no portraits of Leo past childhood since he was an illegitimate prince born to a concubine, but notes his deep black hair is unmistakable. Looking at Leo's back, Rick explicitly identifies him as Prince Marcus's half-brother and the formidable captain of the First Knights. Rick muses that staying hidden in Tori as part of the First Knight's Order, the strongest shield in the kingdom, might actually be the safest place for a runaway prince. Rick wonders how Marcus will react to the truth, noting that having the real saint with the first prince might be convenient, but His Majesty won't be pleased if the false saint is exposed. Rick notes that Leo is quite the gentleman compared to his brother and suggests taking the throne to marry Cybele, but Leo firmly states he just wants to respect her wishes. Rejecting the royal title entirely, Leo firmly declares there is no need for such schemes because he is simply the captain of the First Knights. A stern knight orders their group back to the dormitory, warning his captive that returning to the capital won't be easy, while questioning how long they can keep up this charade. Cradling the unconscious Cybele on horseback, Leo acknowledges that she is undeniably the true saint, though a lingering doubt plagues his mind. Overwhelmed by his growing affection for her, Leo stares down in deep turmoil, completely unsure of what he is supposed to do next. Sometime later, a serene silence settles over the sprawling, sunlit dormitory where the knights reside. Cybele finally gasps awake, her eyes snapping open as she finds herself lying in bed with a damp cloth resting on her forehead. Sitting up in her own room, she recalls the terrifying wolf attack in the forest and Leo's dramatic rescue, confused as to why she doesn't feel any pain. As Elga enters to check on her, Cybele blushes at the vivid memory of drifting to sleep in Leo's warm embrace, wondering if it was merely a dream born of her desires. Ignoring her own condition, Cybele anxiously asks if Rick was hurt, prompting a concerned Elga to ask how much she remembers about the incident. Elga assures her that Rick is physically unharmed, though he is currently locked under strict house arrest awaiting a formal punishment. Relieved that Rick is at least safe, Cybele agrees to focus on resting until her fever breaks, planning to ask Leo for the full story later. 3 days peacefully pass at the Grand Stone Dormitory. Looking completely revitalized, Cybele greets the relieved dorm members and apologizes for causing them so much worry. Leo and Lord Mirko approach the dining table, openly expressing their immense relief at seeing her back on her feet. The knights excitedly welcome her back, praising her cooking while gently warning her not to push herself too hard so soon after recovering. The cheerful reunion is abruptly cut short when a subordinate approaches the captain to deliver the morning report. Immediately taking advantage of her return, the eager knights shamelessly bombard Cybele with a massive list of chores, from doing the laundry to washing the breakfast dishes. Later that night, Leo approaches an exhausted Cybele in the corridor, gently scolding her for working so hard when she just recovered. Pausing her tasks, Cybele looks up at Leo with deep concern and asks if the imprisoned Lord Rick is being fed properly. Leo firmly states that Rick's house arrest prevents him from leaving his room, quickly shutting down Cybele's defense of the boy by reminding her that Rick deliberately put her in mortal danger. Refusing to back down, Cybele insists Rick never meant to hurt her and fearfully demands to know what kind of punishment awaits him. Hearing her pleas, Leo quietly reflects on his own guilt as a false saint, acknowledging that Rick was merely following Prince Marcus's cruel orders. Staring at Leo with wide, pleading eyes, Cybele desperately begs for permission to speak with Rick directly. Shortly after, they arrive at the austere, heavily guarded building where the prisoners are kept in isolation. A masked guard unlocks a heavy wooden door, gruffly announcing a visitor as Cybele peeks nervously into the stone-holding cell. Inside the dim room, Rick sits tensely on a sofa, his expression shadowed by guilt and defeat. Cybele steps inside and breathes a sigh of relief that he looks relatively unharmed, though she immediately frets over a small wound near his mouth as he mutters a quiet greeting. Stepping into the room, Leo firmly requests a moment alone with the prisoner, prompting Rick to quietly agree. Cybele thanks Leo as he steps out and shuts the heavy door behind him, promising to wait right outside the cell. Now alone with her former attacker, Cybele immediately shatters the tension by sincerely thanking him for protecting her from the terrifying monsters. Utterly blindsided by her gratitude instead of the anger he expected, Rick's eye widens in sheer, stunned disbelief. Dismissing her fainting spell as proof she isn't a saint, Cybele is bluntly told by a dark-haired man that she is stupid and that he intentionally brought her there for a valuable experience. Leaning in with an intense glare, he warns a bewildered Cybele that her naive attitude will eventually cause the captain to eat her up. Cybele innocently misinterprets his warning as literal cannibalism to defend Leo, prompting the exasperated man to clarify that knights are simply rough men. He stares her down and cynically explains that men are creatures consumed by their dark desires, choosing to hide their true nature from her. Closing her eyes thoughtfully, Cybele softly concedes that everyone harbors secrets they cannot easily say out loud. He presses the issue, warning that discovering those hidden truths might hurt her and eventually cause her to hate the knights who risk their lives for the country. Clenching her hand over her heart, Cybele passionately declares that her own sacrifices are meaningless compared to the country and vows she could never hate them. Smirking at her resilience, he casually reveals that he wasn't actually the one who saved her, leaving Cybele stunned as she realizes her rescue wasn't just a dream. Surrounded by a mental vision of roses, Cybele blushes deeply as the overwhelming realization hits her that Leo was the one who carried her back. A few days later, a sweeping view of a grand castle is shown as someone loudly calls out for Cybele. Inside a study, an angry blonde man yells at Prince Marcus for recalling him without a word of thanks, while the prince merely sits back with a bored expression. The blonde man demands to know if Cybele is the real saint while defending his reckless methods, but Marcus calmly counters that he never ordered him to put her in danger. When Marcus confirms Cybele is the real deal and clicks his tongue, the blonde man explodes in frustration, accusing the prince of acting high and mighty. Relaxing confidently on the sofa, Prince Marcus definitively declares that Cybele is without a doubt the real saint. The blonde man breaks into a cold sweat, visibly shaken as he stammers that there must be some terrible mistake. Unfazed by the lack of physical evidence, Marcus explains he saw the truth with his own eyes and challenges the sweating man to either believe him or the other witnesses. As the blonde man nervously leaves the room, Marcus cryptically warns him to be careful because there is someone else hiding within the First Night Order. Sweating profusely in the hallway, the panicked man worries that his brother might actually become the crown prince, cursing his father's potential favoritism. He is suddenly startled by guards shouting at Prince Marcus to stay away from the dangerous night training grounds, sparking a dark memory of a rumor about someone joining the order. Clutching his face in distress, the blonde man mutters about the disastrous situation, realizing what a complete mess his plans have become. Meanwhile, a cheerful Cybele stands brightly under the sun, enthusiastically thanking Lord Mirko while he internally wonders what she is doing out in the remote lands. Inside a rustic kitchen, Mirko asks if she was heading to the dining hall, but Cybele happily pivots and offers to brew him some tea instead. Cybele expresses her deep happiness at being surrounded by such kind people, and Mirko warmly admits that her constant cheerfulness significantly brightens his own mood. Looking back at her, Mirko completely changes the subject and bluntly asks Cybele what she really thinks about Leo. Cybele innocently praises Leo as a kind and great captain, but as she sips her tea, a heavy blush spreads across her face as she realizes she feels a weird sensation in her chest when thinking about him. Prompted to describe her specific type, Cybele enthusiastically details a tall, broad-shouldered man with a firm waist and powerful muscles capable of swinging a heavy sword. With her eyes shining brightly, she passionately declares her ideal knight is someone with an unshakable spirit who diligently trains and pledges absolute loyalty to his country. Mirko chuckles at her clear preference for strong, manly men, causing Cybele to wildly panic and profusely apologize for embarrassingly shouting her specific desires out loud. Mid-panic, Cybele freezes in absolute horror as she notices a dark-haired figure partially obscured behind the slightly open door. A visibly flustered Leo peeks through the doorway, awkwardly greeting the two of them as Cybele realizes he heard everything. Cybele is caught eavesdropping by Leo and Mirko, nervously making an excuse about just getting a drink. Leo quickly tells Mirko to come with him and firmly shuts the door, leaving a highly flustered Cybele standing alone. Cybele clutches her blushing face in absolute panic, terrified that Leo now thinks she is a depraved, lustful woman. The scene shifts to Leo and Mirko walking down the hall, with Leo insisting his eavesdropping was truly a complete coincidence. Leo explains he simply heard their voices coming from the dining hall and unintentionally found himself listening in. Mirko sharply calls out to Leo as he walks ahead, demanding to know exactly where he is going. Leo stops and nervously hesitates before Mirko bluntly asks what is going on in his head. Leo's eyes widen with intense focus as he vividly recalls Cybele describing her specific type of man. He remembers her detailing a strong, tall, and broad-shouldered man with a firm waist, dependable legs, and a solid build capable of swinging a heavy sword. Leo frantically mumbles to himself, realizing her exact description perfectly matches Mirko and jumping to the conclusion that they share mutual feelings. Realizing he accidentally spoke his jealous insecurities out loud, a deeply flustered Leo resolves to simply train harder so Cybele might finally look his way. Mirko deadpans that Leo already has a great physique and shouldn't be jealous, but Leo stubbornly insists that his lack of effort is his own problem to handle. With blazing determination, Leo tightly grips his shirt and vows to train even harder to become a man worthy of standing proudly beside her. Mirko reassures his captain that he doesn't see Cybele in that romantic way at all, telling a shocked Leo to stop worrying so seriously. Still deeply anxious, Leo confesses that he desperately wants her to like him back just as much as he likes her, but he has no idea how to make that happen. Mirko sighs at his captain's incredible cluelessness and offers to give him advice, pointing out that Leo is actually extremely popular with women himself. Mirko tells him to listen carefully as he promises to teach him a simple, magic phrase that will make his feelings perfectly clear to her. Leo acknowledges his own feelings but notes that her likely status as the true saint makes taking action a much more complicated matter. He declares that he won't let anything happen to Cybele, acknowledging that their father might soon make a move alongside his brother. Refusing to follow his father's path of loveless marriages and mistresses, Leo vows to protect Cybele's happiness since a saint's power directly thrives on it. Mirko suddenly demonstrates his advice by staring intensely at Leo and delivering a blunt, romantic marriage proposal. Leo recoils in absolute shock at the sudden confession, prompting Mirko to calmly tell him to go ahead and repeat the phrase. Leo frantically protests that asking her to marry him is way too straightforward, but Mirko insists he needs that exact level of resolve to secure her before she is married off to a prince. Shocked at the mere suggestion of letting her return to Prince Marcus, Leo furiously declares he will never send her back to a man who treated her so terribly. Leo explains he originally fled the capital to avoid assassination by the second prince's faction, but promises to return to the castle to protect her if Marcus demands her back. Despite his lifelong desire for a quiet, peaceful life away from the battle for the throne, Leo firmly states his decision is made because he refuses to leave Cybele in their hands. With unwavering resolve, Leo fiercely swears to simultaneously protect the peace of the country and the happiness of the true saint. Mirko respectfully bows to Prince Leopold, promising to follow him anywhere and assuring him that Cybele is bound to fall for that level of determination. Later, Leo approaches Cybele and informs her that half their unit has been summoned to the capital to handle a monster crisis, instructing her to come along as well. Cybele internally breathes a sigh of relief that Leo seemingly didn't hear her embarrassing comments earlier, but realizes the situation must be incredibly serious if the First Order is being deployed to a capital already guarded by 2 other Night Orders. Elga worries about Cybele traveling to the capital due to frequent monster sightings, but Cybele reassures her maid that she will be safe with Leo and the others. Cybele gently offers Elga a magic stone, explaining that her grandmother gave her the charm and always claimed it carried a saint's blessing. Handing over the stone, Cybele expresses her earnest hope that the saint's blessing will keep Elga protected. As Elga holds the stone in silence, Cybele suddenly feels a strange, overwhelming sensation welling up from deep within her own body. Cybele clasps the magic stone tightly in her hands, closing her eyes as a brilliant, sparkling aura erupts around her. Her eyes snap open in shock as a profound realization washes over her. Breathing heavily, a stunned Cybele pulls back and insists that Elga should be the one to keep the protective stone. Elga agrees to hold onto the charm to stay safe while the knights are away, leaving Cybele to secretly lament that her prayers are meaningless since she is only a fake saint. A grand carriage heavily escorted by armored knights begins its departure, rumbling slowly out of the fortified dormitory gates. Leo apologizes for the sudden departure, explaining that they must reach the capital immediately because the monster attacks have put the panicked citizens in danger. Sitting quietly in the moving carriage, Cybele internally panics at the daunting prospect of spending weeks on the road with these intense knights. Clutching her head in despair, she realizes that just a few hours in the cramped carriage are already overwhelming her to the point of breathlessness. Noticing her flushed face, a concerned knight asks if she is okay, prompting Cybele to frantically deny her discomfort and remind herself that this is not a pleasure trip. She insists that she is completely fine and actually struggling with too much energy, though the knights remain visibly skeptical of her frantic reassurances. Looking at her composed companions, Cybele marvels at how calm the knights remain despite heading into a deadly battle against monsters. Letting out a quiet sigh of relief, she reassures herself that she will be perfectly fine as long as she stays by their side. Leo suddenly calls out Cybele's name as the carriage travels through a picturesque, sunlit town. Leaning in close, Leo softly informs her that they have finally arrived at the inn. Cybele blushes deeply as Leo's face hovers mere inches from hers, utterly flustered by his sudden proximity. She erupts into frantic apologies for accidentally using his shoulder as a pillow, But Leo simply smiles and wishes her a good morning while asking if she found it comfortable. Humiliated that everyone saw her sleeping face, Cybele mentally scolds herself for dozing off and repeatedly embarrassing herself in front of the captain. Lord Mirko kindly hands her a room key, and Cybele gratefully accepts it while vowing to behave better, feeling that having a private room is somewhat undeserved. As the carriage continues its journey the next day, Leo checks in on Cybele to see if she is feeling tired. Cybele smiles and thanks him, silently admitting that she is not physically tired but simply overwhelmed by her own happiness, while Leo advises her to rest since they started early. One of the knights teasingly suggests that a lap pillow would be even better for her fatigue, joking that the captain wouldn't mind if she leaned on him again. Utterly mortified by the wonderful yet scandalous conversation, Cybele listens as another knight jokes that the captain's lap might be a little too firm. Cybele's imagination immediately runs wild as she envisions Leo's muscular thighs, secretly yearning to borrow his lap. Startled by her visible shock, Leo quickly diffuses the tension by telling her it was just a joke and worrying that they made her uncomfortable. Changing the subject, Leo warns her that they will have to camp outside tonight because there are no large settlements ahead where they can stay. Cybele bravely asks them to take the fastest route to the capital, assuring a smiling Leo that she isn't scared of camping as long as he is there to protect her with all his strength. Walking alongside the knights, Cybele feels truly accepted as one of their own and is happy they considered her by taking the safest path, even though she feels unreliable. A vendor casually warns the passing knights they might run into monsters if they are heading toward the river, prompting Leo to hope they don't. The group arrives at a wide, scenic river near the remnants of an old stone structure. The knights set up a small riverside camp, with their horses drinking peacefully from the water near their pitched tents. When asked about dinner, Cybele cheerfully announces she made ham and vegetable sandwiches along with a simple soup. The knights praise the delicious meal, noting how amazing her soup tastes and how it gives them strength. Cybele serves the food with a bright smile, happy that her efforts and love are making the knights feel better and recover their strength. Determined to be useful since Elga isn't there, Cybele vows to do her absolute best to support the team. After dinner, the knights tell Cybele she gets an entire tent to herself while they keep watch in the tent right next door to ensure she sleeps safely. Inside their cramped tent, Leo and Mirko comically argue over space, realizing they can't possibly fit together. Refusing to take an entire tent for herself, Cybele bursts out and stubbornly offers to take guard duty instead so the knights can sleep comfortably. Leo firmly rejects her offer to keep watch, but Cybele insists she can handle it and promises to wake them immediately if anything happens. Seeing her determination, Mirko smoothly suggests they resolve the issue by simply sharing their tent with her. Mirko explains that having Cybele sleep in their tent will perfectly balance the numbers and fix the space issue. A diagram visually represents the logic: one person in one tent and two people, Cybele and Leo, in the other. Cybele instantly agrees to the logic, while Leo violently blushes and stammers in absolute shock at the proposal. Cybele happily accepts the offer, ignoring Leo's panicked protests as Mirko casually points out she is completely fine with the arrangement. When Leo asks if she has any strange thoughts about this, Cybele aggressively denies ever considering the idea of watching them sleep defenselessly. Cybele warmly thanks Leo for worrying about her, explaining that since he told her they were like family, she now considers herself part of that family too. Masking her racing heart, Cybele internally screams that there is absolutely nothing strange about sleeping in the same tent because she knows they don't view her romantically. Moved to the point of fake tears by her sincerity, Mirko quickly excuses himself to take the first watch, leaving a flustered Leo and Cybele alone. Lying in the dark, Leo awkwardly bids Cybele goodnight. Cybele lies wide awake, her heart pounding as she processes the situation. Both of them stare at the ceiling, silently panicking over how they ended up in this specific scenario. They awkwardly exchange goodnights again, the tension thick in the small tent. Leo internally screams in panic, wondering how he is supposed to sleep while sharing such a cramped space with just Cybele. When Cybele peeks over her blanket and stares at his exposed muscles, Leo assumes she's still on guard duty and asks if she can't sleep. Leo sincerely apologizes for forcing her into this dangerous situation, but Cybele insists she just wants to be of help. Unable to stop himself, Leo nervously asks what she would do if Prince Marcus recognized her as the true saint, dreading the possibility she might want to return to being his fiancée. Looking at him softly, Cybele honestly confesses that she has no desire to go back. Cybele happily confesses that she is truly enjoying every single day now, adding that if she were truly the saint, she would do her best for the country. Gazing softly at Leo, She expresses a hopeful desire. She softly wishes to stay with everyone. Leo gazes intently back at her in the quiet intimacy of their shared bed. Cybele looks up at him with wide, blushing eyes and softly calls his name. Leo earnestly replies that he also wants to stay with her forever. He hypothetically wonders aloud if he were a prince. Leaning closer, he asks if she would stand by his side to protect the country together, adding that it would make him genuinely happy. Startled by the implication, Cybele quickly clarifies that she just meant she wants to keep doing her best to take care of everyone. Leo smiles tenderly, declaring that if his captain says so, he is invincible and will use all his strength to protect her happiness. Suddenly, a blonde man peeks through the tent curtains and asks if Cybele is asleep. A heavily blushing Leo vigorously denies the man's teasing question about whether he at least stole a kiss. The man scolds Leo for being too slow and wasting the perfect chance, warning that if no one pushes them together, they will stay like this forever. As Cybele drifts off to sleep, she feels like she just had a very nostalgic dream. In her dreamscape, a young Cybele sits alone in a field and asks where her father went. A tall knight approaches the crying young girl, gently asking what is wrong. Cybele recalls that this black-haired knight with sky-blue eyes was her very first love. Looking up at his tall figure, she remembers that he was the reason she started admiring knights in the first place. Waking up to the morning light, Cybele sleepily mutters about the black-haired knight. Leo leans over her, slightly confused by her drowsy mumbles. Cybele jolts fully awake with a loud gasp, her face flushing bright red as she locks eyes with Leo. Flustered and stammering apologies, she is comforted by Leo, who gently assumes she was just cold. Smiling warmly, Leo invites her to go wash their faces together. Cybele stares at his offered palm, remembering how his big hand touched her cheek last night. As she takes his hand and steps outside, she realizes the comforting feeling is exactly like that time in her past. They encounter the blonde man, prompting Cybele to suddenly connect the dots that her first love from when she was 9 was actually Leo. The blonde man, standing shirtless in the river with other knights, cheerfully reminds Leo that he cannot go bathing with Cybele. Cybele's eyes go completely blank as a massive blush overtakes her face from the overwhelming sight. Completely overwhelmed and dizzy, Cybele hides behind Leo and stammers an apology. Leo shields her and politely tells the others to go ahead and take their bath, refusing the offer to join them. Filled with regret, Cybele tearfully apologizes to Leo and the others for bringing someone like her into their group, but a confused Leo reassures her that she doesn't need to hold back. Encouraged by his gentle words, a radiant smile spreads across Cybele's face as she declares that his kindness has given her the strength to do her best today. Meanwhile, at the royal capital, an angry noble berates a terrified Annika and demands she immediately use her saintly powers to subdue the approaching monsters. Overwhelmed and completely out of her depth, a wide-eyed Annika stammers in pure shock as the horrific reality of the situation sets in. The nobles grimly report that the second and third Knight Orders have failed to stop the subjugation, leaving them no choice but to summon the first Knight Order to handle the endless monster attacks. With the castle defenses critically weakened, they furiously order Annika to hurry up and unleash the saint's power before the beasts breach the walls. Squeezing her eyes shut in a desperate attempt to summon magic, Annika weakly whimpers that she is trying her best but absolutely nothing is happening. Breaking down in tears, Annika selfishly blames Prince Marcus for her failure, whining that he never takes her on dates and that her powers aren't working because he clearly doesn't love her. Enraged by her pathetic excuses during a crisis, Marcus viciously snaps back, asking who could ever love such a selfish and useless woman. Attempting to figure out the truth, Lady Vyas interrupts the screaming match and demands Annika's father explain exactly what he saw when he supposedly witnessed her saintly powers healing a small bird. A flashback reveals Annika's father foolishly praising her as the saint simply because she cared for a dead bird and claimed it was all better now. Desperately grasping at straws, her father insists she also has the power to improve the weather when she is in a good mood and make flowers thrive beautifully. Furious at these pathetic claims, the nobles demand she prove her power instantly by emitting holy light or healing wounds, completely exposing her as a fraud compared to the true saint. Seizing the moment, the imprisoned second prince steps forward and loudly declares that Cybele is the real saint, reminding them that he warned them all along. A noble furiously demands to know why the second prince didn't bring Cybele back when he had the chance, while another anxiously asks when the first Knight Order will finally arrive. Grabbing him by the collar, an enraged Prince Marcus accuses the second prince of betraying his childhood favor and blames him entirely for this catastrophic failure. Glaring at his captive, Marcus silently curses the man as a completely useless pawn. The second prince calmly warns Marcus that his cruel actions will leave him with no allies, prompting the furious prince to mockingly dare him to get rid of him too. Driven by blind ambition, Marcus mentally justifies his ruthless actions, firmly believing that as the legitimate son of the queen he is the only one truly suited to inherit the throne. Sweating profusely, Marcus realizes that if his deception regarding the fake saint is exposed, he will not only lose his claim to the throne but face absolute disinheritance. The tense argument is abruptly shattered when a panicked guard bursts through the doors, screaming that monsters are actively storming the castle. Total chaos erupts as terrified nobles beg Annika for a saintly blessing to fight the monsters, while her protective father frantically orders them to stay away from his daughter. Trembling with sheer terror, a crying Annika clutches Marcus's arm and desperately asks him what they are supposed to do now. Outside the stone walls, a massive winged shadow suddenly descends upon the vulnerable castle. Blood splatters across the courtyard as brutal monsters violently ambush the overwhelmed castle guards. Plumes of smoke and debris fill the air as the defensive perimeter collapses under the relentless assault. As the brutal slaughter unfolds, a terrified knight desperately cries out for Lord Marcus while the prince stares up in absolute horror. Looming over the shattered defenses, a gargantuan wyvern spreads its terrifying wings and blots out the sun. The beast lets out a deafening, blood-curdling screech that paralyzes the remaining defenders with pure, unadulterated fear. With a ground-shattering thud, the monstrous wyvern lands directly inside the castle courtyard to slaughter its trapped prey. Amidst the chaos of smoke and falling debris, the knights are shown struggling against the onslaught as they realize their ordinary swords and arrows are insufficient to stop the monsters. Looking out over the devastation, the prince expresses disbelief that the royal capital is being transformed into a place as dangerous as Tori. In a state of total despair, the prince declares that he is doomed to be eaten by the flying lizards and urges Marcus to escape underground immediately. Refusing to flee, Marcus resolves to fight and use his fire magic to buy enough time for the first night order to arrive. Watching Marcus walk away, the prince is overcome with guilt as he reflects on the unforgivable mistake he has made. A servant frantically urges Lord Marcus and the others to hurry and escape through the safety of the underground passage. The prince reflects on his past, admitting he never saw real monsters and foolishly assumed a saint would always exist to keep the country peaceful. As the prince wonders if he was wrong, Annika is heard letting out a terrified shriek. Fearing the absolute worst, the prince believes it is all over and that every person in the royal capital will be slaughtered. A massive explosion rocks the area, sending debris flying and catching the prince completely off guard. Hope begins to return as soldiers notice that 3 of the monsters have suddenly fallen from the sky at the exact same time. The arrival of the First Night Order is officially announced as a group of mounted reinforcements led by a skilled archer appears. The lead archer, Leo, prepares another shot while commanding Mirko to focus on taking care of Cybele. Responding with a determined yes, the knights are urged to hurry as they charge toward the ongoing battle. Watching from a distance, Cybele clasps her hands together and wonders if Annika, Lord Marcus, and everyone else in the castle are safe. Observing the struggle of the Second Order Knights, Cybele and her companions, including Yodi, prepare to move toward the castle. Though she is urged to stay back for her own safety, Cybele feels she cannot simply stand by and watch while others are in danger. In the heat of the charge, Cybele prays for Leo's safety as he gallops forward with his weapons drawn. The intensity of the battle increases as someone lets out a pained or determined shout. As Cybele cries out for Leo to get back, a monstrous creature suddenly swoops down from above to attack. Leo demonstrates his incredible skill by drawing his bow with perfect focus even in the face of the charging beast. The Leo's intense concentration as he aims his arrow at the incoming threat. Leo commands the Second Night Order to focus on evacuating the people while Cybele wonders if there is anything at all she can do to help. Reaching the castle grounds, the prince frantically calls out to check on Rick while warning Marcus to stay back because he senses more monsters. Another monster lets out a piercing roar as it dives toward the survivors. Marcus steps in front of the prince to protect him, preparing to face the next wave of the assault. Seeing Leo in action, someone recognizes him with shock as the captain of the First Night Order. As a bright light begins to emanate from her, Cybele determinedly declares that she will not allow anything to happen to Leo. The monster lets out a final, pained cry as it is struck down by an unseen force. Cybele and her companions watch in shock as the threat is neutralized and the fallen monster crashes to the ground below. In the aftermath of a blinding flash, a dazed Marcus and his fellow soldiers struggle to process the mysterious light that just erupted. Leo rushes to a fallen soldier's side, urgently asking if His Highness is injured. The black-haired knight gazes intently at Marcus, who stares back in stunned silence. Brushing off Leo's concern, Marcus scrambles to his feet and orders the knight to stand down. Marcus snaps at Leo to shut up, stubbornly claiming he doesn't need saving despite previously ordering an evacuation. Leo turns away in silence as Marcus stands alone, visibly shaken and sweating from the encounter. Cybele rushes toward Leo in the courtyard, her eyes fixed on a shimmering object in his hand. Cybele beams with joy, explaining that the magic stone pendant Leo gave her must have made her prayer work. Surprised that she has been wearing the gift all this time, Leo realizes there is more to the story than just the stone. Leo gazes softly at Cybele and tells her that the miracle was actually her own power, not just the pendant. Reminding her of a past encounter with a pack of wolves, Leo insists she has performed this feat before even if she doesn't remember. Leo looks her in the eye and formally declares that she, Cybele Vyas, is the one true saint. Cybele stares back at him with wide, shocked eyes as the gravity of his words begins to sink in. She turns her head in surprise as another presence approaches her from behind. Gasping in shock, Cybele realizes the king of the realm is standing right there. The soldiers and Leo immediately drop to their knees to show respect to His Majesty. The king and Leo exchange a heavy, meaningful look as the royal presence dominates the courtyard. Commanding everyone to raise their heads, the king ignores formalities to address the urgent situation. The king looks directly at Cybele Vyas, his expression stern and regal. He reveals that many have now witnessed her use of the saint's power, which he recognizes from his own grandmother's time. Clasping her hands to her chest, Cybele listens as the king confirms there is no doubt she possesses the power of the saint. Cybele trembles with a heavy sigh, her eyes reflecting the overwhelming weight of her newly confirmed identity. When Cybele mentions her stepmother's belief that Annika was the saint, the king dismisses it as an understandable mistake by someone who hadn't seen the true power. The king looks down at her and questions the foolishness of exiling the true saint without proper confirmation. He declares the previous decision foolish and speaks with the authority of the one who will inherit the kingdom. Cybele stands in stunned silence as she faces the royal family members. The king shocks Cybele by revealing he has another son, the first prince, and commands her to marry him. Cybele bows her head in submission, acknowledging that His Majesty's will is her command. As the monsters vanish and the kingdom celebrates the true saint, Cybele finds joy in seeing everyone safe and happy. While buried in her princess training, Cybele worries about being happy since her new fiancé is a first prince she has never even met. Cybele feels unable to face Leo and realizes she likely cannot return to the knight's dormitory anymore. Even though it was short, she reflects on her time with him, thanking him and stating that being by his side made her happy. In close-up image of Leo's face, looking emotional and slightly flushed. A wide shot of the majestic royal castle under a sky with floating petals. 3 days have passed since the incident, and the knights are busy handling the aftermath. Cybele has been staying at the royal castle, preparing once again to become the crown princess. She wonders how Elga and the people of Tori are doing, noting she hasn't seen Leo, Mirko, or the others since that day. Suddenly, Leo calls out her name. Leo appears below her balcony, explaining he wanted to see her face. Cybele is startled to see him and asks what he is doing there. Cybele excitedly tells him she will come down, but as she moves, she loses her balance with a cry. Cybele falls into Leo's arms and immediately apologizes while blushing. After regaining their composure, they exchange greetings. Leo misses seeing everyone, and Cybele confirms she has been well. Leo admits he was worried about her, but Cybele reassures him she has been treated very well now that it is clear she is the true saint. Cybele pauses, her expression turning somber as Leo looks at her curiously. She reveals the heavy burden on her mind. She is expected to marry the first prince. Cybele asks if Leo knows anything about Prince Marcus's older brother. Leo shares that the prince is a respectable man who spends his time traveling abroad and has not yet chosen a fiancé. When Leo asks if she does not want to marry him, Cybele looks away sadly and confirms she doesn't. Leo encourages her to meet him at least once. Cybele internally reflects that ever since that time, she has only ever thought about Leo. Leo gently suggests she listen to the prince's story, adding that he might be nothing like his brother, Marcus. Cybele feels a pang of sadness, thinking that while he is encouraging her, it is simply because he is a knight. She feels like crying, wishing Leo were the prince instead. A quiet, moonlit scene of Cybele leaning her head on Leo's shoulder while they sit together on a wooden bench. A dramatic split screen showing both Cybele and Leo's shocked expressions as a revelation or question hangs in the air. A transition occurs to a few hours earlier at the castle. Leo, now in formal attire, meets with his father, who greets him after their long time apart. They meet in a grand office. Leo's father tells him there is no need to be formal despite the years since their last meeting. Leo asks his father how much he knew about the entire situation regarding the saint. Leo notes that his father looks far too pleased, like a doting parent, which his father jokingly dismisses. His father reveals the truth. Leo is the most suitable choice to be the next king, and his fiancée has already been decided. Leo's father looks at him sharply and confronts him with the reality. Leo is in love with that girl, Cybele, but is currently ignoring her feelings. Leo stares in stunned silence as his father's words throw him completely off balance. When the king questions Leo's true feelings and asks if he plans to marry Cybele in name only, Leo urgently suggests postponing the engagement to confirm her own feelings. The king watches the saint from a distance as she secretly observes the knight's training, wondering if she truly has no interest in his son. He turns his gaze away, deciding it's fine for now. With a knowing smirk, the king tells Leo that he has been watching her in the castle for a long time and knows her better than Leo does. Leo realizes he must tell Cybele how he feels, even though the king warns him there isn't much time left. Standing beneath her balcony at night, Leo looks up at Cybele and confesses he just wanted to see her face. Cybele leans against him under the moonlight, wishing aloud that Leo were the prince instead of her unknown fiancé. Cybele's eyes widen in absolute panic as she realizes what she just confessed to Leo. Terrified that the first prince might be upset if they are seen together, she frantically declares she must go back now. Leo stands alone, gloomily convincing himself she only said those things because he happened to be the one there. He wonders with a heavy heart if she would actually smile and be happy if he told her the truth about his identity. Berating himself for getting ahead of his own thoughts, he tells himself that Cybele loves her cat, Milko, not him. He recalls her soft wish to stay with everyone forever if possible. Resigning himself to silence, Leo decides he must forget his feelings to ensure she can live happily no matter who she loves or what happens after the truth is revealed. The day finally arrives for Cybele to meet the first prince, and though her maids call her stunning, she feels incredibly heavy-hearted wondering what Leo would say if he saw her. Cybele shakes her head vigorously, reminding herself that she is no longer just a lady, but the saint. As her arrival is announced, she resolves to live for the country as the princess she was raised to be. The massive doors creak open, revealing the grand audience chamber. The king welcomes Cybele to the hall and prepares to introduce the first prince of the kingdom. Cybele bows deeply, forcing a smile and greeting her lifelong partner properly as a matter of duty. She notes from her bowed position that he seems quite strong and reliable just from his stance. Examining his reliable air, she finds something deeply familiar about his presence. As the prince commands her to raise her head, Cybele feels a shock of recognition. She looks up to see the prince's face for the first time. Her eyes go wide as the prince offers a polite greeting. The prince introduces himself as Leopold Grandio, the first prince of the kingdom. Cybele collapses instantly into a dead faint as a shocked Leo calls out her name. A blonde man peeks in and accuses Leo of doing something to her while Leo frantically denies it. Cybele remains unconscious as the chaotic meeting ends. A voice pierces the darkness, asking Cybele if she is finally awake. Slowly opening her eyes, Cybele stares up in shock and weakly calls out Leo's name. Assuring her it isn't an illusion, Leo takes the blame for shocking her, though Cybele insists she is the one who foolishly fainted. Revealing his true identity as Leopold Grandio, the first prince, he leaves Cybele marveling at his handsome appearance even without his uniform. Bowing deeply in shame, Cybele apologizes for her unintended disrespect, but Leo gently interrupts her. Grasping her hands warmly, Leo pleads with her to act the exact same way she always has. A remorseful Leo apologizes for hiding the truth, while Cybele laments that her ignorance makes her unfit to be crown princess. Leaning closer, he firmly dismisses her doubts, insisting that their titles simply do not matter. Looking up at him, Cybele quietly whispers his name in disbelief. His expression turning fierce, Leo declares he cares nothing for his royal blood or her saintly status. Stripping away all pretenses, he finally confesses his raw, undeniable love for her. Catching her completely off guard, he passionately shouts that he has loved her all this time. Flushing a deep crimson, Cybele is overcome with unprecedented happiness as he boldly states his desire to marry her. The mood suddenly shifts as Leo looks away, nervously asking if she harbors feelings for Mirko. Despite her frantic denials, Leo solemnly admits he always saw the undeniable passion in her eyes whenever she looked at Mirko. Claiming it is unfair for him to be the only one hiding his feelings, Leo pushes her to admit her true affection for the other knight. Breaking under the pressure, Cybele explosively confesses her intense love for knights with strong, well-built muscles. Staring at her in utter bewilderment, Leo listens as she meekly confirms her obsession with their physiques. Flustered, she scrambles to explain that she has no special feelings for Mirko and was merely admiring his bodily form. The tension breaks as Leo bursts into genuine laughter, finally understanding her embarrassing secret. Playfully turning the tables, he asks if that means she likes him too, considering he is also a knight. Blushing furiously, Cybele insists she loves him because he is special, even if he isn't quite as strong as Mirko. Stunned by her heartfelt honesty, Leo leans in to confirm if her love is truly real. Without another moment of hesitation, he asks her to marry him. Smiling softly, he accepts her tearful plea to take care of her. Wrapping his arms around her, he pulls her into a tight, loving embrace. As he vows to cherish and protect her happiness, Cybele secretly swoons over the warmth of his broad, firm chest. A formal declaration cements the official engagement between the prince and the saint. Later, a remorseful Elga apologizes to Cybele, admitting she was simply blinded by jealousy. While the first knights return to the capital, Elga and the others begin their new lives serving as ladies-in-waiting. Sent to Tori in exchange, the third knights endure grueling training under Marcus while Annika complains bitterly about doing laundry. Sometime later, Leo spots Cybele cheerfully watching the knights train in the courtyard. Embracing her from behind, he playfully threatens to get jealous if she keeps looking away from him. Smiling brightly together, the narrator assures that with the saint happy, the kingdom will be just fine. Overwhelmed with joy, Cybele silently marvels at what a wonderful person her fiancé is. She scolds herself for her improper thoughts, unable to ignore how strong and firm his massive arms feel. Her internal musings are abruptly shattered when Leo suddenly asks if she wants to touch his muscles.
Imagining elaborate torture methods like water drops or goat licking, one person anxiously questions if Rick is truly safe. Meanwhile, another calmly reassures them that he is perfectly fine. The title page displays the series name, The Saint Happy in Her Exile. It also credits the creators, Akari Tsukahashi and Mihiro Yuki. Additional title credits confirm the creators as Akari Tsukahashi and Mihiro Yuki for the second volume. Character profiles introduce Leo, the combat-skilled but romantically inexperienced captain, along with his confident vice-captain Mirko. Also featured are the annulled noble Cybele and the cheerful knight Yodi. More profiles detail the magically skilled knight Rick, senior worker Elga, and the ambitious second prince Marcus. The final introductions cover Cybele's struggling stepsister Annika alongside her mother. As episode 11 begins, Leo desperately cries out Cybele's name while holding her unconscious body on the forest floor. Cybele remains completely unresponsive, her eyes closed in a peaceful slumber. Checking her condition, Leo confirms she is unharmed and merely asleep. Leo gently carries the sleeping Cybele through the forest while being watched from a distance. The observing figure turns their attention to a dark-haired knight sitting casually near a cave entrance. Assessing the situation, the seated knight concludes that Cybele truly is the saint. Heavy footsteps rapidly approach across the grass, signaling an incoming confrontation. A sudden, aggressive movement breaks the quiet tension. A furious knight violently grabs his comrade by the collar. Glaring with rage, he demands to know if his comrade understands the gravity of his reckless actions. Unfazed, the other knight coldly replies that he was simply following Prince Marcus's orders to verify her identity. When pressed if the prince authorized endangering her, he arrogantly claims that handling a few wolves was easy with his skills. Enraged by this careless excuse, the furious knight delivers a brutal punch to his face. Standing over him, the striker yells that Cybele was nearly hurt, vowing he would have protected her at the cost of his own life. The beaten knight argues he could have used fire magic, but is quickly challenged on what would have happened if Leo had not intervened with a knife. Rebutting the magic defense, his attacker points out he would have just burned the forest down, then demands to know his next move. Wiping his face, The magic user sighs and declares his mission complete since her saint status is confirmed. He announces his intent to return to the capital and report directly to Prince Marcus, addressing Leo formally as Your Highness. Leo stares back in cold, hard silence as the weight of that royal title hangs in the air. The subordinate reveals he knows Leo's true identity as the king's illegitimate child from 25 years ago, recognizable by his deep black hair. He solidifies the revelation, stating the captain of the First Knights is actually Prince Marcus's half-brother. He mocks the runaway prince for hiding within the First Knight's order, calling it the strongest possible shield in the kingdom. Pondering the king's potential anger over the false saint, he wonders aloud what Marcus will do now that the real one is found. He muses that keeping the real saint hidden away might actually play perfectly into the first prince's hands. Taunting Leo about taking the throne and marrying her, Leo firmly responds that he only wants to respect Cybele's wishes. Smirking at Leo's gentlemanly nature compared to his brother, the subordinate accepts the rebuke to stop using his royal title. Glancing at the peacefully sleeping Cybele, he asks if Leo plans to keep her in the dark about everything. Leo steadfastly refuses, insisting his current role as captain is all she needs to know. The subordinate warns him that hiding behind his rank will not work forever, leaving a heavy silence between them. Deciding to head back to the dormitory, Leo issues a stern warning that the subordinate will not be returning to the capital easily. Riding back on horseback with Cybele in his arms, Leo internally grapples with the absolute certainty that she is the saint. Filled with inner turmoil, he wonders what he is supposed to do now that he has come to cherish her so deeply. A peaceful, sunlit view of the knight's dormitory signals a shift in time and place. With a soft gasp, Cybele finally opens her eyes and wakes up. Sitting up in confusion, she remembers the wolf attack in the forest but marvels at her complete lack of pain. Her memories begin to piece together, recalling clearly that Leo arrived just in time to save her. Touching her chest, she wonders if drifting to sleep in his warm arms was just a dream born from her own desires. Her thoughts are interrupted by a gentle knock as Elga enters the room to check on her condition. Brushing off questions about herself, Cybele immediately and anxiously asks if Rick survived the ordeal. Still slightly hazy, she presses Elga to tell her if Rick sustained any injuries during the attack. Elga offers a reassuring smile, firmly stating that Rick is completely fine. She explains that while Rick is unharmed, he is currently bound under house arrest, awaiting his official punishment. Relieved by his safety, Cybele agrees to focus on resting until her fever breaks, planning to ask Leo for the full story later. The narrative jumps forward by 3 days as a bright sky shines over the dormitory. Fully recovered and back on her feet, a smiling Cybele apologizes to the relieved knights for causing them so much worry. Leo, Lord Mirko, greets Cybele, expressing relief that she looks well. She warmly thanks him for his concern. He tells her not to push herself too hard as someone else calls out her name. She hesitates slightly. People quickly surround her, expressing how much they missed her cooking and how genuinely glad they are she is better. She looks overwhelmed but touched by their warmth. 2 knights approach, catching her attention as one addresses the captain regarding the morning's report. A knight asks if she can take care of the dishes after breakfast. She cheerfully agrees to the task. Another knight asks if she can hang the sheets after doing the laundry. She enthusiastically accepts the chore. Someone mentions they have a lot of people today and hints at more work after lunch. She responds with a bright confirmation. Night eventually falls over the silent castle buildings. Leo gently tells Cybele she should rest since she just recovered and it is already night. Cybele looks visibly worried and asks if Lord Rick is able to eat properly. A completely black panel sets a heavy, somber tone for the impending conversation. Leo looks at her with a serious, slightly pained expression on his handsome face. Leo explains they have taken her concern into account, but she argues Rick protected her from monsters. Leo counters that Rick actually put her in danger and is now under house arrest. He clarifies that Rick cannot leave his room until his punishment is decided. Cybele tries to interject. Crying out that she is completely fine, Cybele insists Rick did not mean to hurt her. She desperately asks what will happen to him. Meanwhile, Rick sits quietly, contemplating that he was just following Prince Marcus's orders. He thinks he bears some responsibility too, perhaps as a false saint himself. Cybele pleads with Leo, her eyes wide with desperation, to let her see Rick. She insists she needs to talk to him directly. The sun shines brightly in the sky, marking the beginning of episode 12. A large, sturdy stone building stands beneath the cloudy sky with tents pitched around its base. Inside the building, shadows cling to the stone walls and an imposing iron-barred door. A masked guard opens the heavy wooden door, telling the prisoner he has a visitor as Cybele peeks from behind. The door slowly creaks open to reveal Rick sitting alone in the dim room. Rick stares forward with a tired, bruised face and simply greets them. Cybele exhales in immense relief, noting he looks better than she expected. However, she admits the wound on his mouth worries her deeply. Cybele turns to Leo and politely asks if she may speak with Rick alone for a moment. Leo turns and asks Rick if he is okay with this arrangement. Rick quietly agrees. Rick looks down, his dark hair falling over his bruised face in the quiet isolation. Cybele thanks Leo, who agrees and says he will be waiting outside. The heavy wooden door shuts firmly with a loud thud, leaving them alone. Cybele calls out Rick's name softly in the silent, tense room. She bows deeply before him, earnestly thanking him for protecting her from the monsters. Rick's eye widens in genuine confusion as he lets out a completely baffled sound. He calls her stupid, reminding her he knew there were monsters there and took her on purpose. She waves it off, claiming it was a very valuable experience and completely missing his point. He points out that this proves he is not a saint. She cheerfully admits she was so scared she passed out. Rick sighs heavily, remarking that she really is an incredibly easygoing woman. He warns her that if she keeps acting like that, the captain is going to eat her up one day. Cybele blinks in utter confusion, caught completely off guard by his bizarre words. She misinterprets his warning entirely, protesting that Leo would never eat her like food. Rick stares at her in sheer disbelief, wondering if she even understands what he is saying. He clarifies his statement, explaining that knights are often rough men beneath their armor. Cybele adamantly denies this, insisting there is absolutely no one like that here. Rick tells her men are creatures consumed by their desires, and they are simply hiding it from her. The ominous words echo in her mind, repeating the grim concept of creatures consumed by desires. Surprised, Cybele admits that everyone has things they cannot say out loud, and acknowledges his point might be true sometimes. She passionately declares that regardless of their hidden thoughts, the knights put their lives on the line to fight for the country. Rick warns that they might be lying to her, and one day she might get hurt and start hating knights. Cybele vehemently refuses, stating she is nothing compared to the country and could never hate them. She questions what one sacrifice even matters in the grand scheme. Rick looks at her in stunned silence before dropping the subject, muttering that she really is something. She tilts her head, innocently asking what he means. Rick casually mentions one final thing, asking if she remembers that he was not the one who saved her. He reminds her that the captain actually came for her. Cybele freezes, her eyes wide as she realizes that the memory was not just a dream. A flushed Cybele covers her face in embarrassment, finally processing that she was really carried back by Leo. Someone cries out for Cybele in sudden shock. A few days later, the scene shifts to a grand, sprawling stone castle under a clouded sky. A furious Prince Marcus yells at Rick, demanding to know why he left Cybele alone and why he hasn't even reported back yet. Marcus scolds Rick for his recklessness and for putting Cybele in danger, to which Rick casually deflects by claiming it was the fastest way and that he has been busy with his own hectic troubles. Growing impatient, Marcus demands that Rick hurry up and deliver his report on whether or not Cybele is actually a real saint. Rick clicks his tongue in annoyance at Marcus acting so high and mighty, immediately sparking the prince's outrage. Marcus furiously accuses him of treason for clicking his tongue, but Rick completely ignores the outburst and calmly hands over the report. Looking serious, Rick definitively confirms that Cybele is the real deal. Marcus freezes in absolute shock at this unexpected revelation. Rick mockingly states that it is too bad for the prince, because Cybele is without a doubt the real saint. Desperation creeps into Marcus's voice as he insists there must be some mistake and that it simply cannot be true. Sweating and trembling, the prince demands to know if Rick has any actual proof. Rick admits he lacks physical evidence but swears he saw it with his own eyes, challenging Marcus to either believe him or ask the others involved. Leaning in slightly, Rick delivers a chilling warning that Prince Marcus should be much more careful from now on. Rick casually mentions that there is someone else in the First Knight Order before abruptly dropping the subject, leaving Marcus confused. Turning his back, Rick mockingly wishes the second prince good luck as he departs. Panicking over the emphasis on his rank, Marcus wonders if Rick is siding with his brother and frantically agonizes over what to do next. The prince stares at the imposing figure of his father, fearing that the king will not even listen to him since they barely speak anymore. Marcus clenches his teeth in mounting dread, realizing that at this rate, his brother might actually become the crown prince. A memory surfaces of a long-ago rumor whispering that his brother secretly joined the Night Order. The flashback continues as a young Marcus is scolded and told to stay away from the dangerous night training grounds. Young Marcus protests that he was just looking, while present-day Marcus reflects on rumors that his brother went abroad and might already be dead in battle. Holding his head in distress, Marcus groans that this entire situation has turned into a massive, tangled mess. Marcus wonders what Cybele is doing out in the remote lands, cutting to Cybele cheerfully thanking Lord Mirko for his help. Cybele eagerly offers to make tea for Mirko, who mentions he was just getting a drink and asks if she was heading to the dining hall. A quiet moment stretches between them as Mirko gazes down at her thoughtfully. Mirko notes that seeing her always so cheerful brightens his mood, wondering aloud if her tough life in the capital makes her appreciate this place more. Cybele smiles gently, explaining that everyone is so kind and she is genuinely happy here regardless of her past. Mirko warmly assures her that she feels this way simply because she is a genuinely good person. Catching her off guard, Mirko suddenly asks Cybele what she thinks about Leo. Blushing while sipping her tea, Cybele confesses that thinking about Leo gives her a weird, deep sensation in her chest. She innocently praises Leo as a great and kind captain who looks out for everyone, prompting Mirko to sigh and rephrase the question. Looking her straight in the eye, Mirko directly asks what kind of person is her ideal type. Cybele pauses, her wide eyes reflecting deep thought as she genuinely considers the question. She enthusiastically begins describing someone exceptionally strong with well-trained muscles and a solid, manly build. Lost in her fantasy, she rambles about a tall, broad-shouldered man with powerful arms, a steady waist, and an unshakable spirit who swings a heavy sword for his country. Snapping back to reality, Cybele panics and profusely apologizes for weirdly blurting out her overly specific fantasies out loud. Mirko chuckles and summarizes that she simply likes strong, manly men, while a flustered Cybele frantically tries to backpedal. Mirko watches her embarrassed flailing with an amused but slightly strained smile. The light-hearted moment shatters when Cybele turns toward the cracked door and spots a familiar figure, gasping Leo's name. Leo stands rigidly in the doorway, his eyes cast down as he awkwardly greets the two of them. Total horror overtakes Cybele's pale face as she realizes he likely heard every single word of her passionate rant. Leo stiffly makes an excuse about getting a drink while Mirko questions him, causing Cybele to mentally short-circuit in sheer panic. Completely ignoring Cybele's stammering, Leo abruptly tells Mirko to forget the drink and come with him for a second. The heavy door slams shut, leaving a mortified Cybele completely alone with her racing thoughts. Clutching her blushing face, Cybele spirals into despair, convinced that Leo now thinks she is some kind of depraved, lustful woman. A narrative box firmly states that Leo's arrival at that exact moment was truly a coincidence. Episode 13 begins with Leo marching silently down the hall, internally admitting that he chanced upon their voices and accidentally started eavesdropping. Mirko jogs to catch up with him, repeatedly calling out Leo's name to the silent captain. Mirko desperately demands to know where the brooding Leo is storming off to. A dark-haired man gazes in profound astonishment at a sharply dressed, impeccably poised blonde officer standing before him. The dark-haired man's eye widens drastically as a sharp, highly unexpected realization suddenly washes over his entire being. Maintaining an utterly steady composure, the blonde officer meets his frantic gaze with a piercing, deeply observant stare. Stuttering slightly and struggling to formulate his chaotic thoughts, the dark-haired man hesitates while the blonde officer bluntly demands to know exactly what is on his mind. A vivid memory violently echoes in his racing mind, clearly recalling a highly specific moment when someone explicitly asked Cybele what kind of person was her romantic type. He visually recalls Cybele passionately describing her ideal man as someone remarkably tall, exceptionally broad-shouldered, and immensely strong with a distinctly manly, solid build. Furthermore, she openly desired a dependable partner equipped with powerful arms capable of easily swinging a heavy sword, alongside a firm waist and remarkably long legs. Rapidly connecting the scattered dots, he suddenly realizes with a massive, heart-stopping jolt that Cybele's highly specific description actually matches Mirko's physical appearance perfectly. Frantically analyzing why Mirko even asked about her type in the first place, he wildly and enviously concludes that the two of them might secretly harbor mutual romantic feelings for each other. His panicked, deeply insecure internal monologue is abruptly interrupted as the blonde officer strictly questions his bizarre, totally incoherent mumbling. Trying desperately to suppress his violently spiraling insecurities, he grimly resolves that Mirko is completely blameless in this intensely frustrating situation. Realizing to his sheer horror that he foolishly spoke his deepest thoughts out loud, he listens as his perceptive companion accurately deduces his painfully obvious jealousy. Desperate for a practical solution, he intensely determines that if he simply trains significantly harder to improve his own physique, Cybele might finally start looking his way. The blonde man gently attempts to reassure Leo that he already possesses a genuinely good physique while sternly warning him against the toxic, self-destructive nature of jealousy. Flatly rejecting the offered comfort, a thoroughly frustrated Leo angrily claims it is his own severe lack of effort and fiercely vows to handle this deeply personal problem entirely on his own. Igniting with a spectacularly intense determination, Leo passionately proclaims he will train ruthlessly to become a magnificently strong man truly worthy of standing proudly beside her. Exasperated by the highly dramatic display, the blonde man quickly clarifies that he absolutely does not see Cybele in a romantic light, completely removing himself as a potential rival to aggressively ease Leo's worries. Still thoroughly engulfed in his chaotic emotional turmoil, Leo intensely ponders how to strategically make Cybele return his incredibly deep, overwhelming feelings of affection. Desperate for any tactical advantage, Leo practically begs Mirko for romantic advice. Noting his immense, undeniable popularity with women, Mirko calmly counters by smoothly pointing out that Leo is also surprisingly popular, a factual statement that genuinely baffles the clueless dark-haired man. Leo stubbornly dismisses his own romantic appeal, erroneously arguing that women only approach him because the incredibly charismatic Mirko is nearby staring directly at the heavily blushing, hopelessly oblivious Leo. Mirko candidly remarks on just how incredibly clueless his friend truly operates in matters of the heart. Taking total authoritative charge of the situation, Mirko instructs Leo to listen carefully as he promises to teach him a remarkably simple yet utterly magical phrase. He confidently guarantees this powerful secret phrase will make Leo's hidden feelings absolutely, undeniably clear to the woman he loves. The casual conversation abruptly shifts to a vastly more serious geopolitical matter as Mirko grimly points out that Cybele is most likely the realm's true, highly coveted Saintess. He directly challenges Leo, questioning exactly what monumental steps he bravely intends to take next in light of this incredibly critical revelation. Unfazed by her overwhelming divine status, Leo firmly declares that her holy identity and his deep, personal feelings for her are two entirely separate matters. He decisively steels his iron resolve, asserting that he has already mentally and emotionally prepared himself for the severe consequences of pursuing this forbidden love. Swearing an unbreakable, incredibly fierce oath to protect Cybele at absolutely all costs, Leo accurately anticipates that the rapidly escalating conflict will soon expand far beyond just his scheming brother. He darkly and astutely predicts that even their remarkably powerful father might soon start aggressively making his own calculated, dangerous moves. Disgusted by his corrupted royal lineage, Leo refuses to become anything like his adulterous father who trapped himself in a loveless marriage while shamelessly taking on mistresses. Mirko vehemently agrees with his moral stance, reminding Leo that a saintess's divine power peaks when she is genuinely happy, making her enduring joy his ultimate, non-negotiable responsibility to fiercely protect. Delivering the highly promised magical advice with zero hesitation, Mirko instructs Leo to gaze directly into her eyes and unequivocally state that he loves her and desperately wants to marry her. Leo's eyes violently widen to almost comical proportions as the sheer, unbridled audacity of the incredibly straightforward marriage proposal completely short-circuits his highly anxious brain. Seizing the crucial moment, Mirko aggressively pushes the entirely flabbergasted Leo to immediately and loudly repeat the boldly romantic declaration out loud. As they swiftly march down the opulent, dimly lit hallway, Mirko fiercely encourages Leo not to be afraid of finally expressing his true, unbridled feelings. Panicking wildly and waving his arms, Leo vigorously rejects the dangerous advice, screaming that a sudden marriage proposal is an overwhelmingly and absurdly straightforward tactic. Mirko severely chastises Leo's frustrating cowardice, intensely insisting that he absolutely must possess an unbreakable, unyielding level of resolve moving forward. He coldly reminds Leo that if Cybele truly is the real Saintess, she will inevitably be forced to officially marry a prominent prince of this very kingdom. The horrifyingly dark thought violently strikes Leo, forcing him to agonizingly question whether he should just helplessly let Cybele return to the cruel, unforgiving grasp of the second prince, Marcus. Furious at the mere suggestion since Marcus historically treated her so terribly, Leo fiercely bellows that sending her back is absolutely not an option and he will never allow it. Surprised by the sudden, volcanic eruption of rage, his startled companion demands to know where this intense, protective ferocity is unexpectedly coming from. Strategizing their next monumental, highly dangerous move, Leo boldly declares that if Marcus violently demands her return, he will personally escort Cybele safely back to the heavily fortified castle. Pledging his unwavering loyalty, Kumiko bravely offers to serve as his dedicated aide during the perilous journey. Despite Leo's wistful admission that he never cared for the bloody battle over the throne and only ever desired a quiet, peaceful life. Reflecting somberly on his turbulent, highly volatile past, Leo reveals he rapidly joined the Knights and fled the treacherous royal capital to escape immediate political assassination. He knew there was a severe, ever-present possibility that the vicious Second Prince's bloodthirsty political faction would actively and relentlessly target his very life. Staring directly forward with a piercing, totally unwavering resolve, Leo adamantly refuses to let a truly monstrous man like his brother brutally rule the fragile, deeply divided kingdom. He solemnly informs Kumiko that he has finally made his ultimate, irrevocable decision, remaining firmly unwilling to ever abandon the precious Cybele to their wicked, grasping hands. Making a fiercely solemn, totally unbreakable vow to the heavens above, Leo forcefully swears upon his life to simultaneously protect the fragile peace of the entire country and the enduring happiness of the true saint, Cybele. Visibly moved by his dear friend's incredibly fierce and remarkably noble conviction, Kumiko softly notes that if Cybele directly witnesses that raw, unadulterated determination, she is absolutely bound to fall deeply in love with him. Dropping absolutely all casual, friendly pretenses, Kumiko formally addresses him as Prince Leopold, swearing a powerful oath of absolute loyalty to follow him faithfully anywhere into the impending, dangerous darkness. A towering, brilliantly constructed ancient stone watchtower stands stoically against a bright, partly cloudy sky, silently signaling an imminent, highly dramatic shift in the overarching narrative. Cybele's sweet voice echoes with distinct, heavy confusion as she rapidly processes the sudden, genuinely shocking news of an immediate, forced relocation back to the heavily guarded capital. Leo urgently explains that half of their elite military unit has been officially summoned to ruthlessly deal with a catastrophic monster crisis, and he explicitly demands her immediate presence processing the incredibly grave command. Cybele begrudgingly agrees, quietly questioning if her role during this terrifying crisis will be nothing more than a simple, lowly errand runner. Expressing his incredibly sincere gratitude for her cooperation, Leo forcefully orders her to be completely ready, as they will depart for the dangerous capital the very second their extensive, vital preparations are totally finished. Cybele meticulously analyzes the incredibly dire military strategy, realizing that if the elite First Order is being urgently summoned despite the capital already harboring the Second and Third Orders, the terrifying monster situation must be unimaginably and historically serious. Despite the massively looming geopolitical threat, a heavily blushing Cybele is profoundly and privately relieved that Leo apparently didn't hear her say anything incredibly weird earlier, though a lingering seed of deeply rooted doubt stubbornly remains. Swiftly and incredibly efficiently, thick leather straps are tightly buckled as the frantic, hurried preparations for the arduous, dangerous journey to the capital aggressively commence. Standing rigidly in the rustic room, Elga worriedly confronts Cybele about heading straight toward the perilous capital where horrific, bloodthirsty monsters have been appearing with terrifying frequency. Cybele calmly attempts to soothe her deeply anxious friend, warmly assuring Elga that everything is perfectly fine because the mighty Leo and the other heavily armed knights will be constantly protecting her. Seeking to offer highly tangible, magical protection, Elga urgently presses a deeply cherished family heirloom into Cybele's delicate hands, practically begging her to take the powerful magic stone. She earnestly reveals it is an ancient, highly valuable charm passed down from her wise grandmother, who always devoutly claimed it carried the incredibly potent blessing of a true saint. Gazing deeply down at the mystical, incredibly ancient artifact in absolute awe, Cybele softly whispers about the saint's blessing while Elga confidently and warmly promises that the sacred relic will definitely protect her from all incoming harm. Noting a sudden, highly unnerving shift in her dearest friend's physical demeanor, Elga tentatively and nervously calls out Cybele's name into the suddenly tense, incredibly heavy silence. Clutching the intensely glowing magical stone tightly against her face, Cybele is violently overcome by a magnificent sensation of pure, unadulterated energy intensely welling up from deep inside her very soul. A massive, totally blinding explosion of brilliant, divine holy light violently erupts outward as Cybele inadvertently channels an unimaginable, utterly transcendent holy power directly through the ancient artifact. Her wide, violently trembling eye brilliantly reflects the sheer, magnificent intensity of the awe-inspiring holy phenomenon, completely and absolutely engulfing the small, rustic room. Utterly paralyzed by sheer, unimaginable shock, an astounded Elga breathlessly stammers Cybele's name as the sheer magnitude of the explosive divine revelation violently and permanently shatters her entire worldview. Regaining her composure with an eerie, beautifully transcendent calmness, Cybele gently hands the artifact back, quietly instructing a still-stunned Elga that she should be the one to safely keep this highly sacred stone. Elga hands Cybele the magic stone, warmly assuring her it will protect her while Leo and the others are away. Cybele accepts it but secretly laments that her prayers feel meaningless since she believes she is only a fake saint. The bright sun shines high in a partly cloudy sky, marking the dawn of their urgent departure. A sturdy horse-drawn carriage dramatically rumbles out of the towering stone gates of the town. The townspeople wave goodbye, apologizing for the commotion while deeply thanking the knights for bravely heading toward the perilous, monster-infested capital. Acknowledging the severe danger, Leo notes that the terrified citizens of the capital must be incredibly worried, making their swift arrival absolutely vital. Packed tightly inside the moving carriage, a deeply horrified Leo mentally panics over the prospect of spending weeks trapped in close quarters with his eccentric companions. Spiraling into absolute despair, Leo dramatically concludes that just a few hours in this cramped space is already so overwhelming that he might not even survive the full journey to the capital. Noticing her heavily flushed face, Mirko gently asks Cybele if she is feeling okay, prompting her to internally scream that this stressful expedition is definitely not a fun pleasure trip. Startled by the sudden attention, Cybele frantically waves her hands and loudly insists she is completely fine, desperately masking her overwhelming, pent-up energy. Observing the men calmly playing cards, an amazed Cybele marvels at how composed the knights remain despite heading directly into a terrifying monster crisis. Staring warmly at her capable companions, she silently reassures herself that as long as she stays close to them, everything will truly be all right. A soft, gentle sigh escapes her lips as the quiet comfort of the rocking carriage slowly begins to lull her into a deep state of relaxation. Later that evening, the peaceful twilight sky stretches over the quaint, rustic architecture of their first designated rest stop. Peering intently at a groggy Cybele, Leo gently announces their safe arrival at the local inn. Cybele slowly blinks awake, finding herself extremely close to Leo's strikingly handsome, patiently waiting face. A sudden, violently intense shock jolts through Cybele's system as her eyes widen drastically in absolute, blushing horror. Covering her burning face in sheer embarrassment, she frantically apologizes while a highly amused Mirko smoothly asks if the captain's broad shoulder made for a comfortable pillow. Babbling uncontrollably, a mortified Cybele simultaneously praises the comfort and begs for forgiveness, though a remarkably calm Leo quickly reassures her that it is perfectly fine. Still reeling from the intense embarrassment, Cybele completely loses her composure over the fact that she actually dozed off using the stoic captain's shoulder as her personal pillow. Mentally berating her own absolute stupidity, she agonizes over the horrifying reality that everyone in the carriage clearly saw her completely unguarded sleeping face. Safely inside the inn, Mirko graciously hands a deeply relieved Cybele the brass key to her very own private room. Feeling slightly undeserving of such luxurious privacy on a military mission, she silently vows to never embarrass herself like that ever again. The quiet inn stands peacefully under the starry night sky, offering a brief, much-needed respite from their arduous journey. The following day, the carriage rattles down a bright, sunlit path as Leo considerately checks if Cybele is feeling tired from the relentless travel. The radiant sun gleams intensely through the scattered clouds, illuminating the long, winding road ahead. Blushing deeply, Cybele happily insists she is not physically tired at all because the sheer joy of the journey is so wonderfully overwhelming. Casually nibbling on a snack, Mirko playfully suggests that if she ever gets tired again, the captain certainly wouldn't mind if she leaned on him exactly like she did yesterday. Panicking at the highly suggestive joke, Leo frantically clarifies that he was simply worried because Cybele isn't used to enduring such incredibly long, grueling carriage rides. Ignoring Leo's flustered defense, Mirko cheekily argues that while a shoulder is nice, the captain's lap might be a little too firm to serve as a proper pillow. Cybele's mind immediately short-circuits as she visually imagines resting on Leo's highly muscular thighs, secretly yearning to borrow that incredibly firm lap. Noticing her intense silence, a sweating Leo nervously warns Mirko that his inappropriate jokes might be making Cybele highly uncomfortable. The sprawling, bright clouds drift lazily over the grand rooftops of the final bustling town on their extended route. Leo solemnly informs the group that once they leave this specific settlement, there won't be any large towns left where they can secure proper lodging. Standing in the sunlit street, he respectfully warns Cybele that they will be forced to camp outside tonight, urging her to mentally prepare for the tough conditions. Displaying a bright, totally fearless smile, Cybele assures him she is perfectly fine and bravely requests that they take the absolute fastest route to the capital. Grateful for her unwavering resolve, Leo fiercely promises to protect her with all his strength, comforting Cybele, who admits she isn't scared as long as the brave knights are by her side. Watching the men happily share snacks, a deeply moved Cybele rejoices in the heartwarming feeling that they are truly accepting her as one of their own despite her perceived unreliability. A local shopkeeper nervously warns the departing knights that they might run into vicious monsters if they are heading toward the river, prompting a grim hope from Leo that they avoid any conflict. The expansive, shimmering river flows quietly under the dramatic, heavily clouded sky as the group ventures further into the untamed wilderness. As twilight descends, their sturdy military tents are efficiently pitched in a small clearing while the tired horses peacefully graze nearby. Tending to a bubbling pot over the crackling campfire, Cybele cheerfully announces that she has prepared ham and vegetable sandwiches along with a simple, hearty soup for dinner. The steaming bowls of savory soup and thick, delicious sandwiches elicit incredibly satisfied sighs from the hungry, exhausted knights. Delighted by their enthusiastic praise, Cybele beams with pride as the men eagerly devour the meal, marveling at how her incredible cooking vastly improves even standard rations. Watching them happily recover their strength, Cybele softly clasps her hands together, immensely grateful that pouring all her love into the food is genuinely helping the team. Clenching her fists with renewed determination, she fiercely promises herself to keep doing her absolute best to support them, especially since Elga isn't there to help. A towering stack of completely empty, cleanly scraped wooden bowls stands as a highly satisfying testament to Cybele's immense culinary success. The bright crescent moon glows peacefully over the quiet, heavily fortified campsite as the night deepens. Staring at a surprisingly large shelter, Cybele expresses genuine astonishment that she gets to occupy an entire tent completely by herself. Leo gently reassures her that he and Mirko will be sleeping in the tent right next door and will keep a strict watch so she can sleep safely without any fear. From the neighboring tent, the highly comical sounds of the two grown knights violently bickering over cramped sleeping space aggressively shatter the peaceful nighttime silence. Appalled by the suggestion, Cybele stares in utter disbelief as someone points out the unfairness of her taking an entire tent to herself. Waving her hands frantically, she absolutely refuses the luxury and volunteers to take guard duty instead so everyone else can comfortably rest. Appreciating the thought, Mirko firmly rejects her offer and assures her that he will handle the watch and wake them immediately if danger arises. Observing the standoff calmly, Leo steps in and smoothly suggests that they should simply share their tent with her. Stunned into absolute silence, both Cybele and Mirko stare at Leo with wide, bewildered eyes. Ignoring their shock, Leo logically explains that bringing Cybele into their tent will perfectly balance the numbers. A mental diagram suddenly appears, illustrating the three of them grouped together in one tight space. Grasping the concept, Cybele brightens up with a cheerful realization while Mirko flushes furiously in pure panic. Desperately trying to interject, Mirko questions Leo's sanity while Leo casually points out that Cybele seems perfectly fine with the arrangement. Completely missing Mirko's rising anxiety, Cybele happily accepts the offer and notes that she would be grateful even if the tent becomes a bit cramped. Finally understanding Mirko's implication, Cybele turns bright red and frantically denies harboring any strange thoughts about seeing the two men sleep defenselessly. Clearing his throat awkwardly, Mirko breaks the tension and genuinely thanks Cybele for worrying about his well-being. Smiling warmly with her hands clasped to her chest, Cybele explains that since he treated her like family when she arrived, she now considers herself a part of that family too. She cheerfully declares that there is nothing strange about family sleeping in the same tent, unaware that her innocent words send an agonizing sting of guilt through Mirko's heart. Misinterpreting Mirko's pained expression, Cybele proudly assumes she moved him to tears with her sincerity while Leo dryly plays along. Regaining his composure, Mirko declares it is time to sleep and volunteers to take the first 1-hour watch. He instructs Leo and Cybele to go ahead and rest, prompting a cheerful agreement from Cybele and a highly confused pause from Leo. Smiling softly as she prepares to settle down, Cybele wishes Leo a good night. Reluctantly accepting his fate, Leo quietly returns the sentiment as the night deepens. Lying stiffly side by side beneath the heavy blankets, Leo stares at the ceiling in utter disbelief as Cybele sleeps peacefully right next to him. Outside their glowing tent in the quiet forest, Leo mentally agonizes over how a simple discussion devolved into this absurd situation. Sweating profusely in the dark, Leo questions why he is trapped in such a painfully cramped space sharing a tent alone with Cybele. To his surprise, Cybele peeks over the edge of her blanket with wide, alert eyes. Flustered by his exposed muscles, Cybele claims she is fine and will sleep now, but Leo softly asks if she is actually unable to rest. Turning his head to look at her directly, Leo quietly murmurs her name. He sincerely apologizes for forcing her into this dangerous situation, though Cybele insists she only hopes to be of help since he believes she is the only one who can. Staring intently at her, Leo seriously asks what she would do if she truly were the recognized saint. He specifically presses to know if she would want to return to being Marcus's fiancée if the prince finally acknowledged her true identity. Dropping her gaze sadly to the fabric of the tent, Cybele softly admits that she has no desire to go back. With a gentle and melancholic expression, she repeats her honest refusal to return to her past life. Blushing slightly, she confesses that despite knowing it might be wrong to say, she is genuinely happy now and finds every single day incredibly fun. She acknowledges her duty, stating that if she were truly the saint, she would undoubtedly do her absolute best for the country. Trailing off with a wistful look, she hints that if it were at all possible, she would want something else entirely. Deeply moved by her heartfelt confession, Leo breathlessly whispers her name. Reaching out with profound tenderness, he gently cups her cheek while gazing intensely into her eyes. Flushed and wide-eyed by his sudden touch, Cybele softly breathes his name in stunned surprise. Looking deeply into her eyes, Leo sincerely confesses that if it were possible, he also wants to stay with her forever. Holding her gaze, he quietly poses a hypothetical scenario, wondering what would happen if he were a prince. He asks if she would stand by his side to protect the country together, promising that having her there would make him truly happy. Completely missing the romantic undertone, Cybele brightly vows to keep doing her best to take care of everyone, leaving Leo utterly defeated. Pulling the blanket over his face, Leo quietly vows to himself that no matter what happens, he will use all his strength to protect her happiness. Oblivious to his inner resolve, Cybele cheerfully declares that as long as their captain says so, she feels completely invincible. Silence falls over the camp as the misty forest glows softly under the night sky. Peeking his head through the tent flap, Mirko quietly checks in to see if Cybele has finally fallen asleep. He immediately demands to know if Leo at least managed to steal a kiss, causing Leo to flinch and aggressively whisper a denial. Scolding him for being unbearably slow, Mirko complains that he provided the perfect opportunity by taking the first watch and warns that nothing will progress if no one pushes them together. Annoyed by the cramped space and the relentless meddling, Leo shoves his hand into Mirko's face and demands he move over while Cybele sleeps undisturbed. The silent encampment remains undisturbed beneath the moonlight as the characters finally drift off to sleep. A sudden, dreamlike transition occurs as a disembodied voice mentions having a very nostalgic dream. Deep within the dreamscape, a young girl in a frilly dress sits alone in a bright, hazy field, desperately calling out for her missing father. Startled by a sudden realization, Cybele wakes up abruptly and wonders out loud what is wrong. A vivid memory surfaces within her mind, revealing a tall knight standing proudly amidst a sunlit, misty forest clearing. She remembers that specific knight vividly, recalling his striking black hair and eyes that shone as brilliantly as a clear blue sky. Confirming her own lingering, unresolved feelings, she softly admits that the mysterious black-haired knight was undeniably her very first love. Tracing the deep roots of her profound admiration for all knights, she realizes that this solitary figure was the sole reason it began. Still caught in the hazy remnants of her nostalgic dream, Cybele murmurs about the black-haired knight just as a voice calls her name to announce morning. Snapping completely awake, a voice beside her repeats her sleep-mumbled words about the black-haired knight in clear, questioning confusion. Jolting upright with a sharp, terrified gasp, Cybele stares in absolute shock as she finally realizes Leo is resting right beside her. Blinking sleepily in the dim tent, Leo casually hums and wishes her a good morning while Cybele continues to panic in flustered disbelief. Stuttering a frantic string of apologies, Cybele is interrupted by Leo's calm reassurance as he gently notes that she was probably just cold and hopes she avoided catching one. Stretching casually as he pushes the heavy tent flap open, Leo warmly invites her to go wash their faces together to properly wake up. Staring blankly ahead with wide eyes, Cybele's mind races at 1,000,000 miles an hour as the vivid details of the previous night come crashing back. Her thoughts spiral rapidly as she vividly recalls the heavy, comforting weight of Leo's large hand tenderly brushing against her cheek under the moonlight. Following Leo outside, she watches him safely guide her step and realizes his protective grip perfectly mirrors the warm hold of her first love. The fragmented pieces begin aligning perfectly in her mind, taking her back to when she was only 9 years old and first met the black-haired knight. Staring intently at Leo's broad back, a breathless revelation washes over Cybele as she finally pieces together his true, historical identity. Her profound train of thought derails violently when another knight cheerfully calls out to ask if their captain is joining them for a morning bath. Standing bare-chested in the glittering river, Mirko flashes a teasing smirk and loudly reminds Leo that he cannot bring Cybele into the water with them. Combusting into an absolute tomato, Cybele's eyes widen to comical proportions as her brain utterly short-circuits from the scandalous, bare-chested display. Squeaking out a panicked apology about the situation being too overwhelming, a thoroughly flushed Cybele spins around to flee while a highly confused Leo watches her retreat. Turning her back to give the men privacy, Cybele politely declines the offer to bathe and urges Leo to go ahead and wash up without worrying about her. Feeling immensely guilty, Cybele apologizes for being a burden on the group, though the knights quickly wave off her concerns and insist she has no reason to hold back. Gazing out at the majestic, sunlit castle architecture, a renewed sense of courage fills Cybele's chest as she boldly declares her readiness to face the day's challenges. Meanwhile, deep within the capital, a furious fist slams down against a table as a royal authority screams at Annika to stop her useless excuses. Desperation radiating from every spoken word, the furious nobleman demands that she finally prove her status by using her holy power to subdue the encroaching monsters. Trembling violently beside Lady Vyas, Annika cowers in absolute terror as the horrific, undeniable reality of their defenseless situation firmly sets in. A grim narration reveals that endless waves of monsters are ravaging the royal capital, overwhelming the second and third Knight Orders and forcing the elite First Knight Order into the fray. Panicking as the castle defenses visibly crumble around them, the royal screams at Annika to activate her divine powers before they are all violently slaughtered. Tears streaming down her face, a pathetic and powerless Annika clasps her trembling hands together and sobs that she is genuinely trying her absolute best. The desperate man mercilessly interrogates her, demanding to know why her supposedly emotion-fueled powers are completely useless when she should be basking in pure happiness. Sniveling pathetically, Annika deflects the blame by claiming her powers are failing because Lord Marcus does not truly love her, a statement that leaves the royal utterly dumbfounded. Unleashing a torrent of selfish complaints amidst the crisis, Annika whines that she is miserable because her engagement lacks romance and consists entirely of strict studying. Ignoring the horrific monster invasion outside the very walls, Annika plays the ultimate victim and wails about her helplessness while Marcus listens with mounting, visibly twitching irritation. Snapping completely, Marcus leans in with a terrifyingly dark scowl and brutally screams that no one could possibly love a selfish, utterly useless woman like her. Recoiling from the brutal verbal strike, Annika cries out about his sheer cruelty while Lady Vyas frantically tries to de-escalate the explosive confrontation. Refusing to be derailed, a stern official angrily corners Lady Vyas and demands an exact, detailed account of the divine power she previously claimed to have witnessed. Sweating profusely under the intense scrutiny, Lady Vyas nervously stammers out a weak, pathetic story about finding a fallen little bird. A flashback reveals Annika holding a tiny bird and claiming she miraculously healed it, prompting hollow, sycophantic praise from her foolish parents who immediately dubbed it the saint's power. Desperately scraping the bottom of the barrel for credibility, Lady Vyas wildly claims that Annika's good moods magically improve the weather and make garden flowers grow beautifully. The grand reveal lands with a dull, embarrassing thud, prompting a deadpan, utterly unamused response from the royals who cannot believe this constitutes genuine divine evidence. Stuttering defensively, Lady Vyas is ruthlessly pressed on whether Annika ever actually emitted holy light or instantly healed severe wounds through prayer like a true saint. Slamming his fist in final absolute judgment, the official orders the trembling fake to immediately show them the undeniable raw power of the true saint. Backed into an inescapable corner, Annika breaks down completely, wailing that she has no idea how to use magic while the men curse their impending, bloody doom. Vindicated but thoroughly furious, Marcus sneers in utter disgust and reminds everyone that he had explicitly warned them Cybele was the true, legitimate saint. Pacing frantically through the ornate halls, the second prince loses all composure and screams to know the exact arrival time of Cybele and the First Night Order. Turning his wrath onto Marcus, the prince violently grabs his collar and furiously demands to know why he abandoned Cybele in the first place if he knew her true worth. Taken aback by the sudden, aggressive accusation, Marcus defensively bristles and asks if the prince is genuinely trying to pin this catastrophic failure entirely on him. Spitting with unfiltered rage, the prince reminds Marcus that he only favored him and assigned him crucial missions out of loyalty to their lifelong childhood friendship. Glaring with profound disappointment and venomous contempt, the prince brutally labels Marcus an entirely useless, incompetent man. Dropping all pretense of royal respect, a chillingly calm Marcus tilts his head and venomously challenges the prince to simply get rid of him too if he is truly that worthless. Someone fiercely yells at Prince Marcus to shut up, warning him that his current path will leave him entirely without allies. Marcus fiercely retorts that he is the most suited to inherit the throne as the queen's legitimate son, claiming he is fighting for his mother's sake despite just being born after his brother. Trembling with anxiety, he worries that if this hidden truth is exposed, he will lose his claim to the throne and face outright disinheritance. Completely overwhelmed by his predicament, he nervously wonders what he is supposed to do next. The tense silence is shattered as armored guards burst through the doors, urgently calling out to Lord Marcus with breaking news. Shocking the prince, a desperate guard reports that a horde of monsters is heading directly toward the castle. A terrified noblewoman clutches her daughters and stops the guards, begging Lady Annika for the saint's blessing because she refuses to put her children in such danger. Glancing over his shoulder, a dark-haired knight named Rick urgently asks Marcus what their next move should be. The knight's eye suddenly widens in sheer terror as a massive shadow looms just outside the window. Completely oblivious to the danger, Marcus stands near the window while a terrifying, massive dragon-like beast looms directly behind the glass. Reacting on pure instinct, a heavy boot stomps hard against the floorboard to launch into a desperate sprint. A strong hand surges forward with crackling energy, violently grabbing someone by the back of the head. Marcus lets out a startled gasp as the hand forcefully yanks him backward away from the glass. Shattering the window into countless razor-sharp shards, the beast's massive, fanged jaws burst into the room with terrifying force. The dark-haired knight tackles Marcus completely out of the way just as the gigantic monster's jaws violently snap shut where the prince was standing. Debris flies everywhere as the surrounding nobles and guards scream in absolute terror, crying out frantically for Lord Marcus. Dust fills the air as someone stammers in sheer, paralyzed disbelief at the sudden and brutal attack. Shielding the prince with his own body, the knight stares down the massive beast and horrifyingly identifies it as a wyvern. Gritting his teeth with fierce determination, the knight swiftly draws his blade and ignites it with searing fire. Leaping forward, the knight delivers a devastating, fiery slash straight across the wyvern's snout, knocking it back with a heavy thud. The shrieking beast reels backward from the blazing impact, tumbling out of the shattered second-story window in a thick cloud of smoke. Panting slightly, the knight narrows his eyes and hardens his expression as he fully assesses the grim battlefield. Observing the chaos outside, he grimly notes that the royal knights are struggling because ordinary swords and arrows are completely useless against such beasts. Turning his attention back inside the ruined hall, the knight urgently asks Marcus if he is okay. A visibly shaken Marcus stares at the destruction in disbelief, realizing the royal capital is turning into a chaotic war zone just like Tori. While a panicking Marcus laments that he is doomed to be eaten by a flying lizard, the knight sharply orders him to escape through the underground passage. Gripping his flaming sword tightly, the knight firmly declares his bold intention to stay behind and fight. Preparing to face the monsters alone, he explains that his fire magic can buy everyone precious time until the First Night Order arrives. Marcus looks at Rick with eyes full of deep regret, finally realizing that he has made an absolutely unforgivable mistake. Wasting no time, the remaining guards frantically usher Lord Marcus toward the underground passage to secure his survival. A close-up reveals a trembling eye as the horrifying reality of the monster invasion finally sets in. Gripped by fear, a character quietly admits they have never actually laid eyes on real monsters before this terrifying moment. The sheer scale of the tragedy leaves someone reacting with utter confusion and disbelief. Deeply ashamed, Marcus reflects that growing up in a peaceful era led him to falsely believe the saint would handle everything without him ever needing to lift a finger. Overwhelmed by his own ignorance and regret, he solemnly asks himself if he was entirely wrong. Amidst the deafening chaos of the attack, a soft voice desperately calls out Lord Marcus's name. Suddenly, a young woman with elaborate twin tails lets out a terrified shriek as the battlefield situation severely worsens. A horrific realization dawns on the survivors that the innocent people of the royal capital will be completely slaughtered. Before all hope is lost, powerful and precise explosions suddenly tear through the sky to violently strike the flying wyverns. Hearing the massive blasts, a stunned Marcus looks up to the sky, completely bewildered by the sudden aerial bombardment. The overwhelmed soldiers on the ground stare in utter shock as multiple flying monsters simultaneously drop dead from the sky. Spotting their sudden saviors, someone eagerly points toward the horizon and shouts for everyone to look. Riding triumphantly on horseback with bows drawn, the heavily armed First Knight Order finally arrives to turn the tide of battle. A focused, dark-haired archer draws his bowstring tight and strictly commands his subordinate Mirko to take care of Cybele. Shouting for everyone to hurry, the squad surges forward into the fray as Mirko obediently confirms the critical order. Watching the knights ride off, Cybele tightly clasps her hands together and anxiously prays that Annika, Lord Marcus, and everyone inside the castle are safe. Trembling with overwhelming worry, she tightly shuts her eyes and begs the heavens to let her friends survive this nightmare. While an older knight urgently calls for Yodi to move out, a nearby soldier notices Cybele nervously waiting by the carriage. Peering through the dust, a soldier spots the front lines and points out that the Second Order Knights are visibly struggling against the monstrous horde. Despite desperately wanting to join the fray, Mirko orders Cybele to stay put with him, forcing them to just stand and helplessly watch the brutal battle from afar. Riding desperately across the battlefield, a determined knight hears someone urgently call out his name, Leo. The knight's sharp eyes narrow with fierce focus as he firmly locks onto his target amidst the chaotic carnage. Suddenly, a terrifying wyvern lets out a deafening roar as it plunges aggressively from the sky to attack him. Horrified by the sudden aerial ambush, Cybele urgently screams for Leo to get back. Remaining completely calm under the massive shadow of the beast, Leo smoothly reaches back to draw his weapon. In one fluid motion, the incredibly skilled knight draws his heavy bowstring back to its absolute physical limit. Releasing the immense tension, he fires a devastating, glowing arrow straight up into the wyvern's gaping maw, instantly piercing its skull. Dark blood dramatically splatters across his stoic face as the colossal beast is struck completely dead in midair. The lifeless, massive monster plummets violently into the castle wall, firmly pinned by the sheer force of the radiant strike. Impressed by the display, soldiers praise Leo's amazing prowess while commanding the Second Knight Order to strictly focus on evacuating the civilians. Feeling completely helpless amidst the ongoing chaos, Cybele anxiously wonders aloud if there is anything she can actually do to help. Nearby, an injured Rick furiously holds Marcus back because he still senses more monsters, outright ignoring the prince's frantic concerns about his well-being. Proving Rick's dire warning correct, another vicious wyvern suddenly screeches and dives aggressively toward their highly vulnerable position. Moving with blinding, unhesitating speed, Leo intercepts the lethal strike and boldly shields the terrified prince with his own body. Marcus stares in utter disbelief, completely stunned that the legendary captain of the First Knight Order has personally arrived to protect him. Witnessing the perilous, desperate rescue from a distance, Cybele screams Leo's name in sheer, overwhelming terror. Sobbing uncontrollably, she tightly clasps her hands together and vehemently declares that she will absolutely not let anything tragic happen to him. Startled by a sudden, intense warmth, Cybele gasps aloud as a brilliantly intense light violently erupts directly from her chest. The blinding, holy radiance violently surges outward across the battlefield, causing the terrifying monsters to shriek in sudden, unbearable agony. Both Cybele and the nearby blonde knight flinch in sheer astonishment as the mysterious shockwave completely overwhelms the surrounding area. Stripped of their vicious power by the overwhelming light, The terrifying wyverns suddenly plummet straight from the sky and crash heavily into the courtyard. The bewildered, exhausted knights quickly pause their desperate fighting to marvel at the miraculous light that just decimated the monstrous threat. Catching his breath in the sudden silence, a thoroughly confused Marcus turns to Rick and stammers out a question about what just happened. Interrupting the insecure prince's utter confusion, a highly respectful hand is gently offered toward him by his timely savior. Dropping gracefully to one knee, the stoic Captain Leo checks on the fallen prince and urgently asks if he is currently injured. The seasoned, battle-hardened knight maintains a remarkably sharp, unwavering gaze as he fully assesses the prince's physical condition. Completely overwhelmed by the intense sequence of events, Marcus can only stare back in absolute, deeply stunned silence. Finally regaining his royal composure, Marcus aggressively pushes himself up and orders the captain to stand down, loudly insisting he is fine. Brushing off the offered assistance, the deeply insecure prince stubbornly refuses to show any further weakness in front of the legendary knight. Scowling bitterly, Marcus firmly declares he doesn't need saving while Rick fiercely reminds him that he was specifically told to evacuate earlier. Despite his angry outburst, the deeply conflicted prince glances back with an expression heavily burdened by extreme guilt and unacknowledged fear. Having successfully secured the prince's absolute safety, the highly professional captain turns his broad back and confidently walks away from the bickering pair. Spotting him walking away from the carnage, a deeply relieved Cybele frantically rushes down the blood-stained steps toward Leo. Pausing carefully in front of him, her tearful eyes suddenly widen as she nervously points toward a brilliant glow emanating from his chest. With a remarkably gentle expression, the stoic knight reaches into his uniform to reveal the radiant magic stone pendant resting near his heart. Smiling through her joyful tears, Cybele is profoundly moved to realize his survival was guaranteed by the very magic stone pendant he gave her before. The knight warmly confirms her tearful realization, deeply touched that she actually kept the protective charm extremely close to her all this time. Gently correcting her sweet assumption, Leo firmly insists that the miraculous burst of light was entirely fueled by her own innate power. Completely taken aback by his extraordinary claim, Cybele stares at him with wide, visibly confused eyes. While she protests that she did absolutely nothing, Leo gently reminds her of a forgotten time she instinctively repelled a dangerous pack of wolves. Delivering the ultimate world-altering revelation, he formally proclaims that she is definitively the one and only true saint. The staggering weight of his words hits her instantly, causing her tearful eyes to widen in world-shattering, absolute realization. Eavesdropping on their highly intimate conversation, Prince Marcus completely freezes as the undeniable truth thoroughly shatters his entire worldview. Overwhelmed by the heavy burden of her newly revealed destiny, Cybele turns her head in stunned, intensely trembling silence. A tiny gasp escapes her parted lips as all the confusing pieces of her past finally snap perfectly into place. The dramatic emotional moment is abruptly interrupted as the imposing king suddenly arrives, instantly forcing every single soldier to kneel in reverence. Even the usually unshakable Leo briefly widens his eyes at the profoundly unexpected, majestic arrival of the nation's absolute ruler. Still heavily reeling from her own massive revelation, Cybele's wide eyes nervously track the incredibly powerful monarch approaching them. Promptly dropping to his knee, Leo humbly offers his deep respect, but the pragmatic king immediately orders everyone to raise their heads and abandon formalities. Bypassing his highly loyal knights entirely, the imposing monarch turns his intense, evaluating gaze directly toward Cybele Vyas. Many onlookers have personally witnessed the undeniable display of your extraordinary saint's power. Recalling a memory from long ago, the speaker confirms having seen their own grandmother wield that exact same holy ability. There is absolutely no lingering doubt that what you miraculously utilized was indeed the true, undeniable power of the saint. Overwhelmed by the shocking revelation, Annika's eyes widen as a breathless gasp escapes her trembling lips. A woman interjects, explaining that her stepmother had always adamantly claimed Annika was the true saint, especially since so few people have actually witnessed such miracles. Acknowledging the rarity of experiencing the saint's power firsthand, the speaker concedes that it is entirely understandable how the stepmother made such a grave mistake. However, the devastating realization sets in that the true saint was hastily exiled without any proper confirmation or due diligence. Speaking with the heavy authority of the one destined to inherit the entire kingdom, the judgment falls sharply. The royal figure definitively condemns the previous actions, declaring that exiling the true saint was an exceptionally foolish and reckless decision. As the crushing weight of her false status sinks in, Annika trembles violently in disgrace while Cybele stands poised and serene in her vindication. Addressing the true heroine directly, the royal authority confirms her identity, calling out to Cybele with undeniable certainty. The king reveals that he has another son, the elder brother of the disgraced prince, who rightfully holds the esteemed title of the first prince. Stating his grand design for the kingdom's future, the king commands Cybele to marry this first prince and secure her royal lineage. Bowing respectfully before the throne, Cybele accepts the royal decree as her absolute command, earning a nod of approval from the satisfied king. With a booming voice that echoes across the courtyard, the king officially declares by his royal name that the true saint is none other than Cybele Vyas. The joyous crowd erupts into ecstatic cheers, relieved that the kingdom is finally safe now that the true saint has awakened her majestic power. Surrounded by cheering guards and loyal citizens, Cybele beams with pure, radiant happiness as petals fall gracefully around her. Feeling a profound sense of relief that the terrifying monsters are finally gone, Cybele is immensely glad to see everyone safe and looking so incredibly happy. Despite reassurances that she is merely returning to her destined path of becoming a princess, Cybele silently frets because her fiancé is now the first prince, a man she has never even met. Staring wistfully at Leo's back as he walks away, Cybele realizes with a heavy heart that she can no longer return to the knight's dormitory and cannot even bring herself to face him. Reflecting on their shared past, Cybele silently confesses that even for just a brief moment, simply being by Leo's side made her genuinely happy. Filled with bittersweet gratitude for the fleeting time they spent together, she mentally thanks Leo for absolutely everything he has done for her. Glancing back over his shoulder, Leo's deeply flushed face reveals a swirling mix of hidden sorrow and unspoken affection for the newly crowned saint. Majestic towers of the grand royal castle stand tall against the drifting clouds as cherry blossom petals scatter gently in the prevailing wind. As daylight fades into a sprawling twilight, the jagged silhouettes of distant mountains rest quietly beneath a starry, darkening sky. 3 long days have swiftly passed since the grand revelation, during which the diligent knights have been incredibly busy handling the chaotic aftermath of the monster attacks. Meanwhile, Cybele reflects on her isolated stay within the opulent royal castle, where she has been meticulously preparing to become the crown princess once again. Pacing her lavish room, she anxiously wonders if Leo, Lord Mirko, Elga, and the rest of the people from Tori are doing well, having not seen any of them since that fateful day. Suddenly, a familiar and urgent voice pierces the quiet night, calling out Cybele's name from the darkness below. Peering out of her high window in utter disbelief, Cybele gasps as she recognizes Leo standing outside, demanding to know what he is doing there. Gazing up at her with a soft, earnest expression, Leo confesses that he simply wanted to see her face, though he never actually thought he would be able to. Panicking as he seemingly attempts to scale the treacherous castle wall, Cybele shouts for him to wait, frantically promising to come down before he hurts himself. After rushing outside to meet him, she breathlessly apologizes for the commotion while gently scolding him for being so incredibly reckless. Settling down into a quieter moment together, they tentatively ask about each other's well-being, with Cybele admitting that although she is fine, she has deeply missed seeing everyone. Leo admits he spent the past 3 days constantly worrying about her, but Cybele reassures him that as the confirmed true saint, she has been treated exceedingly well and he has nothing to fear. Noticing a sudden, hesitant shift in her cheerful demeanor, Leo softly prompts her to continue as she struggles to articulate her lingering doubts. Sitting closely together on a secluded park bench beneath the stars, Cybele nervously brings up the daunting reality that she is now formally obligated to marry the first prince. Hearing this sudden matrimonial revelation, Leo's eyes widen dramatically as a painful wave of shock and realization washes over his conflicted features. When asked if he knows much about Lord Marcus's older brother, Leo replies diplomatically that he has heard the prince is supposedly a very respectable man, prompting a hollow, polite agreement from Cybele. However, Leo also notes rumors that the first prince spends all his time traveling abroad and fiercely enjoys his freedom, having purposefully avoided choosing a fiancée thus far. Unable to mask the bitter sting of the conversation, Leo looks away with a heavy, sorrowful gaze as the oppressive silence stretches between them. Breaking the suffocating tension, Leo finally turns to her and bluntly asks the burning question of whether she truly does not want to marry the royal prince. Lowering her eyes with a profound sense of melancholic certainty, Cybele firmly admits that she genuinely does not want to go through with the arranged marriage. Despite her stark reluctance, Leo gently encourages her to meet the prince at least once, unaware that Cybele's heart has been entirely consumed by thoughts of him ever since their time together. Acting the part of the dutiful knight, Leo pushes down his own feelings and urges her to try listening to the prince's story before making any final, life-altering decisions. Swirling fragments of chaotic thoughts and disjointed fears cloud her troubled mind as she struggles to reconcile her duty with the undeniable desires of her own heart. She desperately tries to rationalize her feelings by reminding herself that Leo is merely a knight, but she quickly realizes that his social standing entirely misses the point of her profound affection. With a sinking heart, Cybele concludes that Leo, ever the honorable knight whose sworn duty is to put the kingdom first, would naturally support a politically advantageous marriage between the true saint and a royal prince. Overwhelmed by the tragic unfairness of their disparate stations, Cybele feels a desperate urge to cry, wishing fervently that the man sitting beside her, Leo, were the royal prince instead. Seeking fleeting comfort in the quiet night, Cybele gently leans her head against Leo's sturdy shoulder as they sit together in solemn silence beneath the radiant, glowing light of the full moon. Leo and Cybele's eyes widen in utter shock as they simultaneously let out a bewildered gasp. A few hours earlier, the grand royal castle stands quietly under the glow of a full moon in episode 19. Standing by the roaring fireplace, the king greets his son, noting that it has been quite a while since they last spoke. Leo respectfully agrees, acknowledging his father's words with a tense, formal nod. The king quickly waves off the formality, pointing out that years have passed since they last met in this private manner. Expressing his genuine relief at Leo's safe return, the king listens calmly as his son questions exactly how much he knew about the unfolding situation. Chuckling dismissively at the accusation, the king casually feigns ignorance and asks what Leo could possibly mean. Observing the king's suspiciously pleased demeanor, Leo notes that his father looks exactly like a man doting affectionately on his own child. The king boldly declares that despite his bitter disappointment in Marcus, Leo's safe return secures his position as the most suitable choice for the next king, adding that his new fiancée has already been decided. Frustrated by the high-handed decree, Leo sharply accuses his father of completely ignoring the young girl's true feelings. Narrowing his eyes with profound amusement, the king deduces that Leo has fallen deeply in love with the newly proclaimed saint. Rendered briefly speechless by the sharp observation, Leo regains his composure and mutters that his father's blunt conversation always throws him completely off balance. Suggesting they immediately postpone the engagement until her true feelings are confirmed, Leo faces his father's challenging question about whether he plans to selfishly marry her in name only. Caught off guard by the piercing inquiry, Leo falls into a tense silence, unable to immediately formulate a proper response. The king presses his advantage, bringing up the specific incident where Leo boldly rescued the lost daughter of the prestigious Vias Count family. Pondering the situation aloud, the king questions if this newly declared saint genuinely has absolutely no romantic interest in his son. Shrugging off the growing mystery, the king wonders aloud why she would dedicate her time to secretly watching the knight's grueling training sessions. Smiling reassuringly at his bewildered son, the king insists that everything is perfectly fine despite the complicated royal politics. Tapping his chin thoughtfully, the king reveals he has been silently watching her in the castle for a long time and knows her far better than Leo does. Encouraging his hesitant son to take immediate action, the king commands Leo to go tell her exactly how he feels, though Leo remains highly skeptical of his father's sudden certainty. Accepting the undeniable truth of his own racing heart, Leo realizes with a start that there simply isn't much time left to act. Resolve hardening within him, Leo silently vows that he must find Cybele tonight and finally confess his tightly guarded feelings. Snapping abruptly back to the present moment beneath the high balcony, Leo stares upward as a bewildered Cybele anxiously asks what is wrong. Gazing up at her moonlit silhouette, he admits he just wanted to see her face, acknowledging deep down that he is hopelessly in love with her. Sitting closely together on the secluded garden bench, Cybele whispers her heartbreaking wish that Leo were the royal prince instead. Hearing her breathtaking confession, Leo's eyes widen drastically as a profound wave of emotion crashes over him. Flushed and utterly stunned by her own boldness, Cybele suddenly realizes the monumental gravity of the forbidden words she just uttered. Panicking intensely, a red-faced Cybele stammers out a frantic apology as Leo desperately tries to process exactly what her wish implies. Backpedaling with everything she has, Cybele babbles that her statement was completely impossible and declares she should immediately go back inside, entirely overwhelmed by her slip of the tongue. Sprinting away in sheer embarrassment, she yells that the first prince might be terribly upset if someone catches them together, leaving Leo reaching out for her. Left standing completely alone in the silent, moonlit garden, Leo clenches his fist in deep, conflicted contemplation. Her desperate, tearful words echoing relentlessly in his mind, he ponders the heavy weight of her wish that he were the true royal prince. Doubt immediately creeping into his racing mind, he tries to tragically rationalize that maybe she only said those sweet words because he simply happened to be there comforting her. Imagining her beautiful, radiant smile, Leo fiercely wonders if she would be genuinely happy if he finally revealed his explosive secret. Scolding himself for getting wildly ahead of his hopes, he quickly dismisses the dangerous idea, stubbornly reminding himself that she surely loves Lord Mirko instead. Lowering his gaze in bitter, silent resignation, a dark shadow of melancholy falls entirely over his conflicted features. Remembering a quiet, intimate moment beside her, Leo recalls her gentle confession that she passionately wanted to stay with everyone forever if it were somehow possible. Resolving to protect her precious smile no matter who she ultimately chooses to love, Leo bravely decides he must bury his own desires and definitively tell her the truth tomorrow. The fateful, highly anticipated day finally arrives, and a maid happily compliments a stunningly dressed Cybele as she nervously prepares to meet the first prince. Thanking the attentive maid while internally carrying a crushingly heavy heart, Cybele listens as her attendant eagerly insists the royal prince will be utterly captivated by her beauty. Taking a deep, steadying breath to calm her racing pulse, Cybele forcefully pushes down her lingering sorrow as she prepares to face her unavoidable royal duty. Her troubled mind drifting back to the honorable knight she truly loves, she wistfully wonders what Leo would say if he saw her looking so remarkably beautiful. Shaking her head firmly from side to side, Cybele physically attempts to completely clear Leo from her chaotic thoughts. Reaffirming her noble, mandated status, she fiercely reminds herself that she is a proper lady and the kingdom's undeniably true saint. Stepping confidently toward the grand double doors, she embraces her rigid destiny, declaring that she was raised to be a princess and must live solely for the prosperity of this country. The heavy ornate doors suddenly creak open, revealing the dazzling, sunlit hall awaiting the nervous but determined young saint. A welcoming, authoritative voice echoes through the magnificent cathedral-like room, officially introducing the seated figure as the esteemed first prince of the kingdom. Bowing with flawless, practiced grace, Cybele introduces herself with perfect poise and politely states that it is a profound pleasure to finally meet him. Keeping her eyes respectfully lowered to the polished floor, she internally coaches herself to simply smile and properly greet the mysterious man who is to be her lifelong partner. Glancing up slightly at his polished shoes and remarkably strong stance, Cybele casually observes that the imposing first prince seems quite strong, remaining completely unaware of his true, shocking identity. Carrying a distinct air of reliability, a dark-clad figure commands an undeniable, imposing presence. A close-up of a wide, trembling eye captures a sudden moment of dawning realization as scattered memories finally click into place. The sharp, authoritative command to raise her head echoes through the tense atmosphere, demanding immediate, unquestioning compliance. Adorned in a meticulously detailed royal uniform, the dark-haired man gazes down with an intense, silently expectant expression. Cybele stares up in stunned, breathless silence as the imposing figure politely bids her a good day. Formally introducing himself with undeniable gravitas, he reveals his true, overwhelming identity as Leopold Grandio, the first prince of this kingdom. Standing frozen in her elegant dress, she watches blankly as the beautifully decorated prince slightly turns his broad back. Noticing her eerie, unmoving silence, Leopold calls out her name in sudden, sharp confusion. Without warning, Cybele collapses completely into a dead faint, prompting him to violently shout her name as she crashes to the floor. Bursting aggressively through the intricate glass doors, another man desperately demands to know exactly what Leo did to the unconscious girl. A jagged, incredibly tense silence settles over the room as the sudden accusation hangs heavily in the stifling air. Outside, the magnificent, sprawling architecture of the Grand Royal Castle stands tall beneath a bright, gently clouded sky. Slowly stirring from her unexpected slumber, Cybele lets out a soft, confused groan as consciousness finally returns. Startling awake in a lavish, floral-decorated bedroom, she finds Leopold patiently sitting by her bedside, immediately asking if she is awake. Disoriented and vulnerable, She breathes his name in disbelief while staring into his deeply concerned, hauntingly handsome face. Realizing her embarrassing mistake, she immediately and frantically apologizes for suddenly fainting back in the grand hall. Leopold quickly attempts to shoulder the blame for shocking her, but she vehemently insists the fault is entirely hers to bear. Struggling to process the unbelievable revelation of his royal status, she wonders aloud if the previous encounter was nothing more than a vivid illusion. Dressed down in a ruffled shirt that only accentuates his devastating good looks, he softly confirms that he truly is the first prince. Cybele stammers out his formal royal title, utterly overwhelmed by the staggering difference in their previously assumed social standings. Mortified by her past casual behavior, she frantically attempts to apologize for being incredibly disrespectful without even realizing it. Gently placing his warm hand over her trembling ones, he immediately cuts off her panicked rambling by softly speaking her name. Leaning in close with deep, unwavering sincerity, Leo earnestly begs her to cast aside his imposing title and treat him exactly as she always has. His expression softens into genuine, aching remorse as he profusely apologizes for keeping his true royal identity a secret. Cybele harshly berates herself, concluding that her utter obliviousness clearly proves she is completely unfit to ever be the crown princess. Dismissing her insecurities entirely, Leo passionately insists that their respective titles simply do not matter in the grand scheme of things. She stares at him with wide, tearful eyes, thoroughly bewildered by the intense, unyielding devotion radiating from his voice. Stripping away all societal expectations, he fiercely declares that he couldn't care less that he is a prince or that she is a revered saint. Looking intensely vulnerable, he finally shatters the tension by confessing the simple, undeniable truth that he loves her. Overcome with long-hidden emotion, he admits he has desperately loved her all this time, leaving her completely stunned. Pulling her into a desperate embrace, he asks if she could ever be this happy with anyone else while essentially proposing marriage on the spot. Suddenly struck by a sharp wave of insecurity, he awkwardly pivots the conversation to ask if she actually harbors romantic feelings for Mirko. Conceding that his rival is a genuinely good man, Leo bitterly admits he has noticed the undeniable passion burning in her eyes whenever she looks at him. Cybele violently recoils from the heavy accusation, screaming that his ridiculous assumption is entirely false. Frustrated by the emotional barrier, Leo argues it isn't fair for him to be the only one bearing his soul, pushing her to finally reveal her true feelings. A heavy, suffocating silence stretches between them as she frantically searches for the courage to explain her bizarre behavior. Pushing past her crippling hesitation, she finally stammers out the shocking, deeply embarrassing truth about her supposed affection. Blushing furiously and screaming her lungs out, she confesses that her true passion lies entirely with heavily muscled, exceptionally strong knights. Leo's eye violently twitches as his brain completely short-circuits at the sheer absurdity of her ridiculous, muscle-obsessed revelation. He stares blankly at the steaming, mortified girl in front of him, hopelessly struggling to process the incredibly ridiculous turn the conversation just took. Utterly baffled by her highly specific physical fetish, he slowly asks for confirmation that she genuinely just loves knights for their muscles. Frantically waving her hands, she defends herself by explaining she was only admiring Mirko's well-built body, completely devoid of any actual romantic interest in the man himself. Humiliated by her own terrible explanation, she desperately begs him not to laugh at her ridiculous secret, though an awkward chuckle escapes her lips. Apologizing through his sudden, unrestrained amusement, Leo quickly points out the obvious fact that he is also a knight. Recognizing a golden opportunity, he hopefully asks if her deep adoration for muscular warriors means she might actually be attracted to him as well. Cybele immediately panics at the pointed question, loudly and vehemently denying his hopeful, entirely wrong assumption. Visibly deflating, Leo sighs in bitter resignation, sadly assuming he simply isn't as physically strong or visually appealing as Mirko. Red-faced and incredibly earnest, she finally confesses her deep love for him, clarifying she loves him because he is uniquely special to her, not just because he's a knight. Leo freezes in absolute shock, his eyes widening dramatically as the overwhelming weight of her genuine, heartfelt confession finally hits him. Seeking desperate, final confirmation to anchor his racing heart, he asks if her love is truly real, solidifying their newly formed bond. The dark-haired man gazes tenderly, his eyes shining with unshed emotion as he begins to voice a life-changing, monumental question. Leaning in closer with absolute, unwavering sincerity, he finally utters the momentous words she never expected to hear, directly asking if she will marry him. Overcome with overwhelming emotion and blushing furiously, Saibal admits she isn't perfect but tearfully begs him to take care of her. Breaking the heavy emotional tension with a soft, genuine laugh, he affectionately points out that she has actually given him that exact same dramatic response before. Looking down at her with absolute, unfiltered adoration, he openly and warmly declares his deep, abiding love for Saibal. As he pulls her into a firm embrace promising to protect her happiness forever, she completely melts against his broad, muscular chest. Even in this incredibly tender moment, she finds herself blissfully distracted by how incredibly warm and strong his sculpted body feels against hers. Sometime later, Marcus and the others formally apologize to Saibal for their past treacherous behavior. Her sister tearfully embraces her in a heartfelt reunion, admitting that her previous cruelties simply stemmed from deep-seated jealousy over Saibal's heavy, saintly burdens. Meanwhile, lasting peace steadily continues to flourish throughout the kingdom of Tori thanks entirely to the newly activated magic stone. The powerful ancient artifact remains heavily imbued with the saint's lingering, benevolent blessing. Life quickly adapts to a cheerful new normal as a young girl excitedly announces her prestigious new role as a lady-in-waiting alongside Elga. Concurrently, the elite First Knights Order makes their triumphant, highly anticipated return to the royal capital to officially guard the massive castle. To maintain strategic military balance, the Third Knights Order is swiftly deployed to Tori in direct exchange for the returning veteran troops. Marcus receives strict, unyielding orders to vigorously train both his weak physical body and his fragile mind within the grueling ranks of the knights. The disgraced trio violently complains about their harsh new reality, with the girls whining pathetically about doing laundry while Marcus struggles helplessly to lift a standard heavy sword. Watching their pathetic trembling, their ruthless supervisor brutally yells at them to shut up, desperately hoping this agonizing physical labor will finally force the spoiled royals to mature. High above the sprawling, peaceful training grounds, the bright sun shines down brilliantly on the dense, silhouetted forest canopy. Sitting contentedly on a bench facing the expansive estate, Saibal enthusiastically admits that she simply cannot help but marvel at how amazing the training knights are. Approaching silently from behind, Leo calls out her name, playfully teasing her for eagerly watching the muscular warriors train yet again. Leaning down to whisper intimately against her ear, Leo dangerously warns her that he might actually get a little jealous if she keeps getting so easily distracted. He smoothly promises to demand her full, undivided attention the moment they finally return to their private quarters. Flushing deeply red at his sudden, breathtaking proximity, she breathlessly whispers his name in a dizzying mix of surprise and eager anticipation. He gently reminds her that very soon, it will just be the two of them completely alone against the world. The peaceful kingdom flourishes beautifully, resting easily under the protective, benevolent watch of the peculiar saint who deeply loves heavily muscled knights. Smiling radiantly at her beloved fiancé, she basks completely in the overwhelming, simple happiness of her perfect everyday life. Staring up into his strikingly handsome face, Saibal internally swoons, still completely unable to believe that such a wonderful, high-status person is actually her promised fiancé. Her mind quickly drifts to pure, unfiltered physical appreciation, heavily fixating on the tantalizing fact that his incredibly firm arms are easily twice the size of her own. Every single time his powerful, muscular frame envelopes her, she experiences a profound, dizzying happiness that completely defies all logical explanation. Mortified by her own intensely impure thoughts, she buries her burning red face in her hands, letting out a soft, highly embarrassed whine. She chastises herself fiercely, realizing just how wildly improper her obsessive, muscle-focused fantasies truly are for a revered holy saint. Catching her intense, lingering stare completely, Leo smirks knowingly and shamelessly offers to let her touch his heavily muscled arms. Caught completely off guard by his dangerously tempting and incredibly direct offer, Saibal's eyes widen to the size of saucers as she lets out a sudden, highly shocked gasp.